I've
Hey, y'all.
gonna do some checks.
As usual, having some technical difficulties, so Pace will be with us in a moment.
It's the only way to begin a live stream. Oh, cross.
I feel with the 6 people is more justifiable to have someone having an issue.
Unfortunately, people can go through our catalog and see that our 4-person lives also have fun starts.
We're going to have to find a way to have... I was thinking maybe doing like mailbag or something regularly in the beginning as folks are filtering in could be nice, or just something to like...
Fill the time.
Yeah.
Yeah, also we've fallen off doing mailbag, and I'm pretty sure we have some nice ones that have been languishing. We don't just get hate mail.
Of course not.
It's the YouTube. So I guess give us a moment and we'll run through some of the spot checks. Yeah, YouTube is up and running.
Twitch is good as well.
You see YouTube working for you?
Yep.
Yeah.
It's still not loading for me.
You just got to go to the channel. Yeah.
I am on the channel.
Yeah, if you go to Psymposia, it's like there, so...
It's about like a 20-second delay compared to what we're doing.
The link that I'm on says people are waiting.
Again?
You must have gone to the wrong link.
I put
Are you
the link
clicking
in.
through from the live stream link?
I'm clicking
that you
through
put
from
on
from the emailer.
The
And it says
emailer?
people are waiting.
You must have sent the wrong link.
I put the UCR one on everything.
It should
I
literally
think I'm
just
seeing what
be
you're seeing, Normie.
Yeah.
Normie. So for the future, it should literally just be youtube.com
there we go.
/c/Symposia/live.
I'm gonna drop the correct link in
We
the
did it again.
chat here.
Normie, this is what I was saying when we were talking about it. This is what the link should always be. It's just that.
The one I gave should have worked too, because it was the channel ID, like the number, and followed by live. So I don't know.
Well, I'm gonna tweet out the.
Because it was the channel ID.
Sorry.
Bear with us, everybody. We're just still a bunch of noobs. I am not making that mistake again. That's 2 times in a row now.
Did the one you share not have the /live at the end?
It was the one that you sent me.
But that had /live at the end.
I believe so, yeah. It was the UCR. What are the one that started with UCR?
Yeah, that's why I just stick with the.
The direct live URL.
Yeah.
Russ,
That
did you
was
post
what
that
I
in that
sent,
channel?
though.
I posted it in the incorrect video in the chat.
Yeah, Nishay, I wasn't arguing about the ID code. I just mean rather than the string of numbers or whatever that YouTube generates, because it'll take you to the same thing with the channel /Symposia/live.
Yeah, no, I was just saying that mine shouldn't have caused a problem because it was just substituting the number ID for the name.
Totally.
So I don't know.
No, I hear you.
Hey, Russ, I don't see the thing that you posted in there either.
Now Pace is here as David Nichols and says he can't hear us.
That's great.
Normie, you don't see that in the chat of the one that has 19 waiting?
Nope.
I do.
Russ, did you post the new link?
I thought I did. I posted it in a video, and there was one person who had commented in the chat. Michael Rose commented. And I commented underneath that.
Okay, I'll jump in as well.
I got it.
Okay.
Oh wait, the link that I just clicked from the email that went out this morning took me there. So at some point you used the right one, and at some point you used the wrong one.
I didn't change anything. They were all the same.
They can't be like.
We're gonna fight later, Dave, about it.
Huh? I mean, I'm telling you, like I just clicked the one that went out this morning, and it took me, and I'm listening to myself.
100% next time.
Now, hang on, I'm clicking the one
like
from
Michael Rose
yesterday.
made it to the right one. That's good.
They're all taking. There may just be a longer delay. They all work.
They all work now?
The ones that I just clicked on.
Plot twist.
So hang on, unless it's an old one. So the first test that Normie sent yesterday works. I'm so sorry that people. Yeah, I'm just gonna shut up about this.
Oh yeah, no, I clicked on the live stream link and it went to the right one.
Okay, literally everyone that I have clicked now has worked. So everyone was right.
It was in our heads that we had a problem.
You create your own. Oh, okay. Here's somebody saying I had a tab open from a week ago that didn't work.
Another data point.
Oh
okay.
man.
Yeah,
That's like waiting in line all night.
Can't remember where I came from. Yeah, ain't that the truth? Just woke up in this reality, and here we are.
Speaking of, because I'm using Safari, and that it's not letting me. I tried to feature that comment, and I can't interact with the comments. And oftentimes, I'm the one who's like doing stuff.
I think. So, are you not logged in as a? There, we can pop that up. Are you not logged in as an admin? Because I also had to add you.
Yeah, no, I guess I clicked on the link that was just the restream.
Okay.
So if someone else wants to just keep an eye on comments.
Yes. I will try to keep an eye on comments. Or if you want to ping me in a little chat thing. Can you hear us, other David? No.
Weird.
I mean, it's got to be an issue on his.
I always unpaste this little GIF of just the guy smashing his computer and just cleaning it up, throwing it in the dumpster.
He's still with the.
Yeah, and unfortunately, Pace is critical to this conversation because he is Dave Rubin's biggest fan here, so we 100% need him.
Is it just me, or is his video also very?
It's kind of choppy.
It's a little choppy.
We definitely in the future need like a plan to fill time rather than just berate ourselves for how incompetent we are, which I feel like isn't a great look.
Who needs to berate themselves when the competence is clearly visible?
Yeah.
I don't know, Normie. Do we have any lingering mailbag?
No. I was expecting a little bit for the Rubin stuff, but we didn't get any.
Rubin
What
stuff.
does he mean he doesn't have anything?
From the emailers, I was expecting some hatred, but I think those people have kind of shaken out of our mailing list at this
They've
point.
already left. Wait, so you're expecting just announcing the topic would get?
Oh, we've gotten that before. Like, where we say we're going to do something, and people are like, stop putting your shitty political opinions out there, or you're ruining the drug conversation with disruptive or divisive topics.
We could just start. Oh.
I was going to say we could. So there's an article that just came out about Christian Angermayer, and I know we're going to be talking a bit about Dave Rubin and Angermayer and all that anyway. But considering that this just came out, I think like 8 hours ago.
Mm-hmm.
It might be worth. So there's a piece called "The Founder of the Biggest Psychedelics Company Says Legalizing Magic Mushrooms Risks Creating a Backlash That Could Undermine the Industry." And I'll go ahead and throw a link. It's paywalled, but we've got an archive link I'll throw in the chat. And so pretty much, and interestingly enough, Angermayer claims in this article that the opinions he's expressing are not those of Atai's, just his own. You know, he's the founder. And he sort of talks about whether or not we are ready for legalization, if people can handle it. He says, "I fear that if we do wider legalization, it could be very detrimental and bad for those who really need it, and it could push back the whole effort," Angermayer said. "Society is like a rubber band. If you hit too hard, it really comes back and hits you back. Let's go step by step." So I'm struck by this notion. So we've pointed out sort of throughout the whole corporadelic push that talk about access is usually a red herring. That the way that people sort of frame these discussions around access doesn't acknowledge that, like, medical regulation doesn't necessarily equate to access, especially when they put that in conversation with how quickly they think this stuff needs to happen. I mean, we're still talking years away from much of this stuff, you know, if it gets approved. Never mind the fact that people are pushing narratives of, like, psychedelics for COVID relief, which they say is, you know, immediately necessary. But also this notion that, like, we know, and we've talked about the fact that prohibition isn't based on any evidence, and that, like, somehow the idea that pushing against the harms of prohibition and trying to undo the clear repercussions of this purely political project.
Well, and what's kind of funny is I just listened to a podcast today where Angermayer does say, like, does kind of cop to that it was a political thing to push back against. He says the hippies, but I think it was kind of bigger than that, than just hippies.
For sure.
But,
Yeah.
So it's just kind of funny to hear him make, like, that rubber band comment, and but he is willing to acknowledge that it's pointlessly prohibited technically, but he's like, but we can't go all the way back just yet. And sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, you're all good. He also brings it up in the context of the Rubin interview, so I won't say too much about it, but, like, both in this article and in Rubin and elsewhere, as Pace has pointed out, like, the need to sort of wall off the commons, the need to create this exclusivity, the need to create, like, barriers to access for the rest of us. You know, in this case, like, you know, I've pointed out medicalization is functionally prohibition light. This is creating special classes that have access while keeping it illegal for everyone else. This is creating special demarcations of who can sell and where they can sell. And actually, that's something that he points out in the article as well, where he says that he's in favor of decrim, but not legalization, specifically because legalization will create avenues for other people to engage in commerce. He then says that his views aren't influenced by concerns over market competition. Bullshit. And that's when he says they don't represent the views of Atai. He's literally talking out of every side of his mouth.
Well, and I think it's like
another.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
Just another reference, if anyone's interested in, like, medicalization and the scheduling issue, what was the phrase used? Light.
Prohibition light.
Prohibition light. Yeah, thank you. Tehseen Noorani wrote an article titled "Making Psychedelics into Medicine: The Politics and Paradoxes of Medicalization." That's in the Journal of Psychedelic Studies, and he talks about the bifurcated scheduling that's inherent to medicalization. So just wanted to put that out there.
Totally. Sarvesh,
I was just going to say, like, it just reminds me of, like, a soft trickle-down policy of the purported benefits of psychedelics, you know, as long as I can get myself in there as the elite, you know, and which is why, again, I agree with your point, David, that it seems like Christian was talking out of literally trying to make every point at the same time, and therefore resulting in an incoherent mush of just gobbledygook.
I think we might run into a little more of that as we go through these Rubin clips.
Yeah, exactly. And we've talked about it too with regards to like Sam Altman and some of these other like multi-millionaires and billionaires in the space, where it's like, because they're so well resourced, they don't really have to worry about or give any consideration to their political ideologies and the actual fault. Like, there's no need for them to defend it, because at the end of the day, they have the ability to kind of do whatever they want, say whatever they want. I'm also going to go ahead and throw the Tehseen article in the chat, and to point out with what Nishay was saying around some of the issues that came up there. Oh, I just lost it.
Somebody in the comments from Facebook, I think, just said, pointed out that, is it Tehseen?
Yeah.
Ran that Madness and Psychedelics conference. Did you speak at that, Dave?
Yeah, I gave a talk. Lily Ross gave a talk dealing with sort of... she also did a conversation with somebody else about like some of the questions of like therapist power dynamics and all of that. But yeah, the Psychedelics Madness and Awakening conference has a bunch of interesting content for sure. And Tess has been around. He was involved with Hopkins for a while. He's sort of taken on it. I really appreciate some of the folks who've hung around dealing with the humanities side of things, because it's as Nishay knows, it's quite the slog, and there's not necessarily a whole lot of sympathy from the more, so-called hard science folks about the merits and importance of the humanities. And then I think when we look at some of the study designs, it's quite apparent what's lacking, why those humanistic perspectives can be pretty crucial.
We got a pace back.
So we've got a pace. Well, I guess we can vamp for another moment on Angermayer. I just wanted to bring it back to the incoherence for a sec, because I think too, it's sort of fascinating the more appearances that he gives. I don't know whether it's him getting more comfortable with being in the spotlight about psychedelics and some of his backstory and this, that, and the other. But the backstory is continuing to morph. B, as he brings new details of his backstory into focus, those new details sort of shift at various points. His claims around some of it, which we'll get into as far as like who sat with him, who it's appropriate for. But he's also, at various points, he said he doesn't want to name people, because he doesn't want to incriminate them or sort of tie them into giving him advice or pointing to engaging in illegal acts. But then at various other interviews, he'll name them in ways where he sort of exposes them. And so it's sort of funny to see the billionaire's incompetence at engaging with like criminal subcultural norms. I don't know, maybe that's just an Easter egg of sorts, but watching him sort of enter more and more of that on the record, I am curious how many folks are comfortable with all of the stuff he's put out there about them. Like the Reinhold, the scientist over in Germany, who's given him all of this various information, apparently showed him David Nutt's study and suggested that he try mushrooms.
Yeah, he was pretty remiss
over there.
Say what?
So, I don't know what's going on with Sarbesh's.
Sorry, I just had
a rave. It was a light show for us.
I had to plug my laptop back in. Something weird with the plug. My bad, guys.
No, you're all good. We've also got this nice comment from Alex over at the Durham University Psychedelic Society saying, thanks for all the work. Thanks, Alex. It's appreciated for sure.
Yeah, likewise.
Aha! Pace can now hear us.
We got 50% of it working. He can hear us.
Oh, but we can't hear him. Is your mic muted? Did you hit the mute button?
Yeti?
Oh, God. Yeah, TM is saying in the chat, For someone who has a lot of money to deflect criticism, he's pretty cagey about his origin story. It's not like he was a patient or something. And in fact, that's a point that he makes over and over again, right? That he wasn't doing this for any sort of medical reason. He's actually, well, we'll get into this when we get into the Rubin stuff, but he's got this ideology of some might call toxic positivity, where, you know, even the notion that he might have had something to address seems to treat that as like an unlikely or unreasonable idea.
Well, another thing too, and it's common with not just these psychedelic entrepreneurs, but also just like tech billionaires, is the willful obscuring of their own past, or self-mythologizing, reinventing origin stories for themselves. I mean, in comic book terms, we call that a retcon, but we assume that that's like part of the story. Here, on the other hand, we're dealing with real people with real consequences and billions of dollars on the line. So it's kind of striking that we are so fully fact-free that this is not just expected, but in some ways shape and form the norm, you know, for this kind of business.
And as Russ found out, like his origin story, even with regards to sort of his corporate background, where he claims to be the co-founder of this company, Ribopharma, we went and did a whole bunch of way back, you know, archival digging, and found that not only are his claims about Ribopharma contradicted by the founders themselves, but directly contradicted by a variety of like old websites where he's listed as like a board member there. Then I went digging and found that in whatever this like sort of secondary or post-secondary school thing that he did, he was involved in this sort of like, it was like a student-teacher investment alliance where they were all playing around with money as like a student project. So like you could see like, and he talks about it in various podcasts about his early interests in like finance and this, that, and the other. And yet the way that he makes it out, like it was this pure like, oh, I was really interested and really like just on it, so I was there doing it. When you actually unpack it in the context of like what some of those websites show, it looks like it was more of like school projects that were sort of bringing students into investment dynamics and the markets more broadly, and then it seems like he's parlayed that quite well into his personal fortune. So
all right.
But I guess there's weakness in community or whatever. But we've got a pace now, so
yeah, I heard him take a sip of tea or something.
Hey,
it's definitely tea. Yeah. Sorry, I had some technical difficulties, but I did sort it out with the help of the team. So
we're just happy you're here.
Great to be here talking about like sort of a strange confluence of things that we've been working on for a while. We got some corporadelics. We've got, you know, classically liberal, conservative. Yeah. Dave Rubin.
Yep.
Yeah, it seems like a fated meeting between the two of them somehow.
Right. Anyhow, couldn't be better, you know, material for a conversation. There's a lot to unpack.
For sure.
Well, and I just want to take a moment and point out that this is precisely the kind of dynamics that we've been sort of anticipating, predicting, discussing as coming in. You know, as we've watched the sort of IDW and alt-right, alt-light, right-wing creep into psychedelic spaces, the notion that we were going to see some of that mirroring, you know, in the actual sort of constructs of the space. Well,
we pretty much have like full spectrum IDW now. At this point, who's missing?
Right. Well, actually, Dave Rubin was missing because apart from, you know, Jordan Peters, or apart from Joe Rogan, Dave Rubin's really been a hub for the what I guess he called at one point the new center, but you know, we also call it the intellectual dark web. This includes everybody from, you know, Stefan Molyneux, Charlie Kirk. This is their idea of the center. Brett Weinstein, Peter Thiel. So it's a self-conscious like attempt to shift the Overton window, and Dave Rubin's career reflects that. You know, he used to be with the Young Turks. And then he started, being anti-woke and identified as a classical liberal. But now he's sort of like the game is up. The mask is off, and he's just your garden variety conservative on Glenn Beck's The Blaze, taking Koch brothers' money.
And yeah, just as a quick note about the Overton window stuff, Pace, you've talked for years about how sort of psychedelia is ripe for this type of entryism. Alan Piper discussed it as part of the cultic milieu and low barriers to entry. And then we've got folks like Izzy over at MAPS, straight up saying, we don't want to shift the Overton window, we want to expand the Overton window. So when you expand the Overton window, you get right-wingers, alt-right, Nazis, the whole, it makes it more hospitable to people across the spectrum.
I wish that was a gaffe, but I know that it wasn't.
You guys want to get to it?
Why don't you take us away? Yeah. Play us on.
How's that for everybody? Is that a good view?
Yep.
Yeah.
We like it? All right.
You got audio?
You have to accomplish something in a video game.
Hang on, we'll pause here for just a second. We have like a little bit of intro here just for people who haven't been introduced to Dave Rubin or Christian Angermayer. We kind of just put a little intro together for everybody so you can get some of their thoughts off the bat.
You have to keep trying to succeed. Yes, can you go to GameFAQs or can you get the cheat code and all that stuff? You do, but it really is about you figuring out how to do all this stuff. And that, to me, sort of shows why the media, and especially the leftist media, hates games now, or hates gamers. They don't like people who solve problems. Is this a bridge too far, or am I onto something?
Hey, pause real quick. So, just so we know, what's being referenced here is Gamergate, which was really like part of the seed of the alt-right sort of getting a lot of young men radicalized, and Dave Rubin here is full on for the gamers.
I haven't really thought about it.
I think there's something there. Gamers want to get shit done. Whatever world you're in, whether you're playing a sports game or an adventure game or an RPG or whatever, you're building something, you're accomplishing something. You may have to have teammates and all do it. You don't want people to help you do everything and cheat for you. That's not what the left likes. Sure. So they have to not like games. I think there's something really there. I think also, just on a broad sense, just knowing some history, not even political philosophy, but just knowing history, because when I was in it with the progressives, I would have conversations with people that were public people, and we'd start talking history, and I'd go, man, you don't know basic history. I'm not just talking American history. I'm talking history of the Middle East, of Europe. Like, just basic stuff. Know some basic stuff so that your arguments have some value. That's Jesus right there. Even though Jesus probably would have been
loved them both, right?
Muslims. He was around a lot of Muslims. It was the Middle East, and as the rolling.
It's so amazing to me.
When he says he was in with the progressives, is that he's talking about the Young Turks time? That kind of.
I think so.
Okay.
Hang on, I'm screwing up the...
Sorry, Nishay, was there...
Oh, I thought that clip was good to, show, for those of you who don't have the delight of being exposed to Dave Rubin, just the kind of... It's a good insight into his general grift, where he says things in a, straightforwardly confident way, but he's not super keen on facts and things lining up in a way. So that's just for the reason we thought to show some clips. And this is standard. There's a whole Dave Rubin clips channel that has kind of this sort of example in it. But just hearing his intro with Angermayer, you wouldn't necessarily have this larger context of the trends of how the kinds of information he presents and the way that he presents it. So
he just did this interview with Trump a few weeks ago. It's batshit. It's crazy.
Yep.
He doesn't challenge anything. It's strictly for viewers.
Stones taught us you can't always get what you want, but you get what you need. As most of you probably have already seen, we followed up our chat with Peterson and Shapiro with the brothers Weinstein, Eric and Brett. It was their first public appearance together ever, and I have to say that my brain is still in recovery mode from taking in so many high-level important ideas.
It's that refractory period.
All right, I'm gonna keep going.
So, is the next
real quick? I realized I was muted. That quote was peak Dave Rubin, and people should know there's a subreddit for Dave Rubin, but it if you go to r/Dave Rubin, those are not Dave Rubin's fans, and so the late great Michael Brooks did a wonderful impression of that quote right there. Brain in recovery mode from high level important ideas.
All right, here we go.
Is that the end of the Rubin part? Intro?
I think so.
Yeah.
I think the next part is Christian Angermayer from an interview, not the one that we'll be discussing tonight, but I think it's a kind of an interesting look into his kind of philosophies around happiness and mental health. That might color some of the discussion tonight.
The main point I'm always making, which I'm really sort of literally happy about, is that I was a very, very happy child. Yeah. So I really have a rule. That. Yeah. So no negative movies. I never watch a movie which has not a happy ending. So I have people check or I check, before, does it have a happy ending? No bad endings. Nothing which makes me sad. Nothing which makes me negative. Because I'm not allowed in my own religious philosophy to have negative thoughts and feelings. Feelings are even more important than thoughts because I think they are the underlying drivers. But I would tell everybody the two things emotionally is like, don't have negative thoughts, just focus on positive sort of thoughts, visualize. These are the key things. Be happy.
But just quickly on that point of being really positive and unapologetically positive and saying, listen, don't call me with the same problem twice. Don't interrupt my positivity. There's this whole movement happening on Instagram at the moment where there's such a thing as being toxic positive, it's called.
It's bullshit. Part of the millennial culture of these victimization and always like blah this is so wrong. This is so wrong. Yeah. So to pre-take a question, because then normally we say, well, you saying that because you're rich, you're white, So I was like, okay, this is maybe a point. Let's go back because I didn't talk a lot about it, but I'm happy to talk about it. Like, I grew up in this 90 people village. Yeah, I'm gay. I'm actually happily gay. And I was looking at sort of that world I was growing up in, and I was like, that's not gonna resonate here. Yeah. So seriously, like, so in my school, people were saying, let's beat up gay people, and I was like, that's gonna end well. But I didn't think that is anything bad, by the way. I didn't even think these people were sort of wrong. Obviously they were wrong, but I was like, they don't know better. I'm not like, these are bad people. I was just like, be pragmatic. Sometimes life is not fair. Sometimes life is not nice, but you can decide if you react on it. That's one of the other points I really believe in, that you have these tiny milliseconds in life on everything. If somebody is sort of rude to you, if somebody says something very bad, and you can decide if you hurt or not. It's your decision, by the way.
Okay,
nothing's going to hurt you.
Too much. We have to address some of this.
Michael Rose in
when
chat.
Rwandans. Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, I was just say he pointed out that he's missing out on some great movies.
Totally. No, he starts with this like, I don't watch movies that give me negative thoughts, which would be presumably feeling sad or mad or
what is the distinction between thoughts and feelings that he somehow makes? There is none. I don't understand.
No NUI,
But also the notion that like all of those legitimate human experiences are just like off limits, or that like, that in his reality, or even like to take some of the absurd, like you choose to be hurt, like when Rwandan secret police come into your hotel room to do you in.
I think Henry Rivera pointed it out in the Facebook chat. He said, no negativity. As a psychologist, I can tell you that's whack. And I totally agree, and I think that's so it's so interesting that he's the guy who's kind of being held up as the figurehead of revolutionizing our mental health. care.
Yeah, let's talk about that for a minute. Like,
yeah, did we mention the IPO yet?
no, we haven't.
No, not yet.
Unless
because I feel like that's important context for like people who are just tuning in. Of like, here's this like affable, kind of quirky guy, but who is heading one of the hugest, most, with one of the biggest potential. What Atai and Compass Pathways are probably
and Atai
biggest
is currently at $3 billion market cap
valuation. So they just recently had IPO, initial public offering with a list on NASDAQ, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
I don't know if some of you guys who've been following this want to like chime in more, but I just feel like it's important context for people watching this.
Yeah.
He is the face of psychedelic medicalization at the moment, as far as like corporadelic, like the notion that MAPS, like just as far as like market share and resources, like MAPS isn't even a drop in the bucket in comparison.
Oh, they're dwarfed. They're not going to.
Angermayer was just featured on a panel with Doblin where Angermayer represented for-profit psychedelia and Doblin represented non-profit psychedelia.
Which is quite funny because MAPS Public Benefit Corporation is not a nonprofit, but okay, sure,
right, right. But I mean, like again, there is a person steering the ship and doing a hostile takeover in some ways of psychedelic research. Who doesn't believe in feeling negative feelings?
Isn't IP squatting literally every MDMA derivative kind of a negative thing to do?
Not if you don't.
We'll get into that. Should we get back into it?
Yeah.
Into it.
Gonna be hurt. The negative thing being gay in a very hostile environment and not talking about it and focusing on other stuff completely made my life. Yeah, in a very positive way. I'm so happy that this was the case.
And actually, because I do not believe in governments at all, like in general, at least I believe in that they can set the framework, but not in details. If I want to make it very, very pointy, I would say I rather trust a 16-year-old Robin Hood trader with capital allocation for innovation than the government. So it's actually the right thing to do. In an extreme way, let's send on checks to Robin Hood traders and let them decide which innovation to finance.
So I just want to point out that first of all, governments do in fact exist. He does trust the government really with the entirety of his business strategy, which relies on strong IP and contract enforcement. I mean, now this isn't a contradiction for somebody who's effectively a libertarian, but it is one of those things that's rarely discussed when these sort of like small government people, we should run government like a business kind of people come out. Is it's never really pointed out that they like the guns enforcement side of government that protects their business, and they don't like anything that gets in the way of them privatizing everything.
Yeah, and as we were talking about just before we got into the actual video stuff, like when he's talking in that recent article about wanting to, having concerns that legalization will make problems for his business model, like how does that get enforced? Who gets to, like that's an appeal to the machinery of the state, right? That's a notion that the state is going to come in and highlight, or the state is going to come in and sort of like make those ground rules and enforce the fact that they'll have that sort of medical monopoly. But he doesn't believe in the state. So go.
So I wanted to just call out that Dustin, a friend of the show, I guess, former friend. I'm fucking tripping over my god words. Hi, Dustin. He says ATI market cap is $3 billion and Compass is $1.4 billion. Next closest is MindMed at $75 million. Thanks for fucking me up, Dustin. But great information as always.
Yeah, we've also got John Hanna here. Hey, John, saying that it's not going to be pretty when the dude's dark side shows itself. And yeah, we're going to get into a little bit of that because it's sort of baked into the cake, you might say.
Yeah.
All right.
Here we go.
There it is.
Here we go.
This needs some
You want to take us
narration.
through that, fine?
So just maybe a brief content warning for some sort of grim stuff. We won't get too descriptive on any of it, but
yeah. So I mean, this is what happens when you don't want to like look at negative things. We've been banging the drum on this for over a year now about how the most powerful capitalized guy in psychedelics, the most influential guy, also sits on the advisory board of the Rwandan president, Paul Kagame. He's championed him. He wrote this article back in March of 2018 when Black Panther came out. He wrote this article comparing like Kagame and the situation in Rwanda to the real life. He's the real life Black Panther. On the right hand side is a variety of articles that have come out. If you just Google Paul Kagame, his reputation has been changing over the last several years now. Human Rights Watch has been doing a lot of coverage on him. This first article that I was reading is a Quartz article on just the executing of citizens. There's been a lot of Rwandans who have been like forcibly removed from Kigali, the capital city, to kind of make it palatable to Western investment dollars, to kind of give it a clean appearance. There's various political killings that have gone on, opposition, people who are critics. His regime, he pretty much directly he did directly order the assassination of one of his former intelligence guys, the top intelligence guy, who went on to become a critic. They sent assassins into South Africa. I'm reading a book on that now by journalist Michaela Wrong on that assassination, and it's all documented. One of the movies that has a real bad ending is Hotel Rwanda, where right now Paul Rusesabagina, he's the guy that saved a lot of Rwandans from the genocide. And there's the movie that, is it Don Cheadle plays?
Yeah.
I believe. Yeah. And he was recently kidnapped. He went on a plane, and the plane actually was rerouted to Rwanda. He's being held on terrorism charges now, and the prosecutors recently are going for life imprisonment for him. And there's just various, it's all over the place. After the genocide, like the West did nothing. The Kagame army basically kind of stopped it a little bit, even though they committed some atrocities as well. But that story was basically sold to the West, that Kagame was the savior. And in the past couple decades, he runs a police state there. Critics have been removed, and all of it. And it was
and
really,
as Michael Rose pointed out in the comments, he's got an assassination section on his Wikipedia page.
There you go.
I want to highlight real quick that the Hotel Rwanda movie, first of all, is a fantastic movie, and he saves like a ridiculous number of people's lives. Was it like 1,000 people?
I think it was something.
So Oscar Schindler was lionized by Steven Spielberg for I believe saving a number of Jews by employing them, and this man risked his life. He was a business owner. He put everything on the line to prevent people from certain death, and this is his fate.
Yeah, and look,
just
right
don't
now,
think about that unhappy ending.
Right now in Rwanda, there are you can't publicly criticize Kagame at this point, and he even sends spies, assassins to other countries, track people down. There's instances of this happening in England and in France. It is a police state. That's the current state of Rwanda right now, and the fact that this is that Angermayer is just so closely associated.
Well, he doesn't believe in government so much, right?
No. Or doesn't
Right,
believe
he's
in
just on
negative
the
thoughts.
advisory council.
So,
Shall we? Yeah.
That felt important to point out. I know
It
that
is important. Every
anyone who
time.
follows us, we hit on this quite often, but it's worth pointing out quite often because it's really kind of mind-blowing to me.
I mean, these are now the atrocities that are linked to the psychedelic, corporadelic medicalization space.
Yep.
Dave Rubin, and we're mixing it up.
All right, so we're going to actually get into the show now. That was just a little bit of introduction, so you kind of know who some of the people who we're talking about today are.
A bit today, we're going to shift from politics. Hallelujah. We're going to be talking about crypto, about longevity, and of course, about magic mushrooms. Joining me is the founder of Iperon Investment Group, a board member of the Hayek Institute, and the founder of the Angermayer Policy and Innovation Forum, Christian Angermayer. Welcome to the Rubin Report.
Hi, Dave. Pleasure to be here.
It's good to be with you. You know, you were one of like 10 people that I would occasionally check in with in the last year and a half to make some sense of the world and talk about COVID and lockdowns and science and fact and all that.
Pause here.
Yeah, there we go.
Talk about COVID and lockdown, right? Can we see that?
Can we?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh yeah.
Salud.
So this is who Dave Rubin's checking in with.
I want to just lead real quick with the fact that this Twitter exchange actually ended with Christian Angermayer challenging Psymposia over Twitter to a debate, and so we will still take that.
Oh, I got that in
challenge.
here. Casey. Think
Yeah, and just for whatever it's worth, this is a retweet of Trump, hyping hydroxychloroquine and azithromycin, and Angermayer is saying President Trump is absolutely right. There is enough evidence to give chloroquine and azithromycin to COVID patients. These are already approved drugs with well understood and minor side effects.
And what did we later find out?
Well, I think we've got that in here too.
So I'm going to just start you broadly here. Where are we at in the world right now? Where are we?
All right.
There it is.
So here's a paper from the American College of Cardiology in which the conclusions are basically that the use of hydroxychloroquine and azithromycin was associated with increased mortality in COVID patients. And the notion that Angermayer had of just like mass dosing the populations with these drugs and that this would somehow solve the COVID crisis. I mean, at the time he was so invested in that perspective that he was bragging about how well his tweets would age and about how us over at Psymposia, how we were being sort of prohibitive or restrictive of like actually engaging in life-saving interventions. Of course, now we know that this would have been likely life-ending interventions in a number of cases.
I like the American colleges.
Oh, sorry. I just wanted to point out just one thing. Azithromycin, if people aren't aware, is a Z-Pak. It's a normal bacterial antibiotic that you take for routine stuff. It's like a 5-day or 7-day course of treatment. The fact that you're trying to apply a bacterial drug as something that targets bacteria for a virus doesn't make any sense. It's like false just from a scientific perspective, and the increased mortality like totally scans with that because you're not even targeting the active virus that's causing the COVID in the first place.
Great point, Sarvesh.
I just wanted to point out that their perspective, their takeaway after all of this is that it's time to put the story to rest.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, I also wanted to point out that when this was being tweeted originally, we were talking amongst ourselves about the fact that, you have these tech elites, people who benefit from the stock market, who had reasons to want the plebes to get back to work on the streets. So it's like we had these public health interventions like social distancing, mask wearing, et cetera, that we know to be effective. And meanwhile, it tracks with, this sort of person who has a lot to lose by people social distancing, and when your profits are tied to the stock market, et cetera. So gambling with people's lives on something that maybe might work, but there's no evidence, didn't really make sense to us.
Well, and even if you think about some of the social distancing and whether or not, like in the case of like droplets versus aerosols and like how effective, you know, like to what degree do you actually need to shut things down to get to sort of ensure people's well-being? Like you also wind up with the fact that like none of those, like whatever degree of sort of winding the economy down, none of that is in the sort of ruling class, the owning class interests. And that like when you start going down that road, like the notion that for Angermayer sprang from the hip with untested, you know, in this case, interventions is more beneficial to him than like sort of going a wait and see slower approach, at which point, you know, everything is just kind of economically speaking more drawn out on the recovery side.
And importantly, explicitly agreeing with Trump on this one.
Totally.
Let's get back into it.
We are.
Oh, sorry.
Well, let's start there. I'm vaccinated, so I'm pro-vaccination. If that is, it seems still to be a big debate in the U.S. Always when I post something, I get a lot of hate and love and whatever. But in generally, like if we discussed it before, like if we take it one level higher, one of my ideas is, or my views is that sort of the whole world is kind of going into, or is already in, a mental health crisis, meaning it's really in a mental health crisis in terms of really like what we at the moment define as mental health crisis, like depression, anxiety, addiction. So all of opioid addiction, like all of these numbers are skyrocketing. Mm-hmm. But I think we have way more issues we as a sort of planet or humanity is going through mentally, which we have not defined yet as a real disease. So if you talk to so many people, they feel literally, they can't even express it because there is no word for it. Somehow I think the majority of people feels that the world is going in a direction which doesn't make sense for them, so they can't understand
let's pause
those
here.
things anymore.
So okay, actually, yeah. Cyrus, you had a point that I think I
wanted to hop in. He kind of like elliptically describes, you know, like some broader problem transcending just mental health crises, opiate crises, and things like that. And it's funny because he's just so close to actually describing something without actually saying that. And that necessarily is kind of the malaise that affects late capitalism. Whether it be, and honestly, to step back a little bit, a lot of what we even observed during the COVID and the vaccination crisis was due to that. I mean, we would not have zoonotic transmission if it were not for industrial farming, for example. Go ahead.
So later on, he's going to get a little bit more into this when he talks about a fear of the future and how that we don't have a disease for that yet. And that's something that he wants psychedelics to be able to address.
I actually would like to direct anybody who's watching or listening to our open letter that really talks about this, that was written at the same time of this exchange with Christian Angermayer on Twitter, called Dear Psychedelic Researchers, that addresses what Sarvesh was just talking about.
I'll go ahead and throw it in the chat.
Yeah.
And B, they subconsciously, and that's even worse, know there might be no place for them in the world, let's say, we the tech elite is building. So I'm always, when I have these literally...
We the tech elite.
Sorry, plebes, there might not be any space for you here.
And this is a point he makes numerous times throughout this, is he very much identifies being part of the elite, the technocratic elite, the billionaire kind of ruling class that
I mean, we agree though. This is true.
I just find it interesting that he identifies with that so easily.
Yeah.
Well, I want to point out to what Pace is saying, like we do agree with that, but it's like the way, it's like when the business press talks about how precarious workers are a good thing, right? Like, and it's a question of like, we agree, but because we have a different analysis, like we agree that the world that the tech elite are building, you know, basically creates even more surplus population, treats our data as a commodity, as capital, like does all of these things. But when we look at what the outcome is, you know, not being in that, you know, fraction of the top 1%, like we understand this to be like a very different sort of reality for those people. Sorry, Pace.
Well, you know, I don't know. I wanted to connect it to something that I saw recently and I heard a couple of times. You know, it's phrased variously, but you know, there's some folks who say things like MBAs are just Marxists who think that that worldview is good actually. I think Chomsky said that you know the business class are sort of brutal Marxists in the sense that you know they very much understand that there is an underclass that is to be exploited, and that's the game.
Shall we continue?
Yeah. Really, every time we do a new investment, and I'm telling my friends, like we just did a investment in a brain-computer interface company. And so my vision is, and I'm super excited about it, that in 10 years, 15 years, all of us going to have brain implants. Yeah, brain-computer implants.
Can't wait.
And then we can sort of do things like from telepathy to communicating without any device. Meaning the sky is the limit. What you can do if our brain is directly linked to a computer. I think it's fascinating. And always when I talk to friends of mine, I realize how deeply terrifying that is for them. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's just one example. So what I'm thinking is, and I'm coming back why I'm saying that in terms of COVID. So I'm thinking like, again, the world, it makes less and less sense for people. At the same time, they don't feel sort of at home, or they see they don't have a place, and that frightens them. Yeah, and fear, unfortunately, brings out the worst in us. Yeah, so and fear and trauma is also one of the underlying root.
I just want to say that being fearful of this guy's vision is perfectly normal. Perfectly normal.
Yeah, there are rational fears.
He's talking about putting brain implants in you, and it's irrational. It's going to bring out the worst in you to be like skeptical or afraid of that.
Yeah, sometimes when he talks about how the general public is fearful of these things, I feel like he's talking from a place of like, I don't know, kind of like godlike omniscience in a weird way. Like, you're afraid, you don't need to be afraid. I've like got you, or you're within my plan. It'll go okay at least, or something. I don't know. It kind of weirds me out.
It's that classic, like Dave talks a lot about authoritarian, approach where the elite knows best, and it's just a matter of like, if you don't understand, we just need to medicate you until you comply.
Yeah.
I wanted to just point out too, like, speaking of movies that are perhaps negative and therefore not on Christian's to watch list, THX 1138 has explicit mind locks, and he's talking about having brain computer interfaces to engineer telepathy and whatnot. If your worldview is to not have negative thoughts and you now have telepathy, like, what does that entail? I don't know. It's just when you spout off gobbledygook without realizing the implications of what you actually say, it's meaningless,
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, also how, by what mechanism, by what therapeutic modality can one address one's trauma, one's depression, one's addiction, all of the things that are being discussed by, the corporadelic medicalization folks without, addressing those negative thoughts and feelings. It's really bananas, really, that this is the public face of psychedelic medicalization, and his personal philosophy is really contrary to the whole argument, the whole project.
Yeah, oops.
No, it's okay. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to take a moment and share. So a friend, Feral Meme, did this meme for, here we go. Neuralink. You know, that face when your Neuralink gets ransomwared and your augmented reality will let you see nothing but a tutorial for Bitcoin so you can pay your own ransom. And like, you know, like the sort of dystopian reality that Angermayer seems to be pushing for, and he's not alone in that. Like, and I'm currently working on like a little video project that'll hopefully get into some of this, but Brian Johnson with Kernel, they're doing Kernel Flow and working with Cybin, the notion that like people are going to get access to your neural data in the hopes of giving you sort of positive nudges about what you should be doing with your time, with your engagement with the world. I mean, we're talking like if it goes right, it seems horribly dystopian, and if it goes wrong, it seems horribly dystopian in like another vein. So the sort of stuff that they're looking to roll out in conjunction with psychedelics, or even using psychedelics almost to like grease the wheel to say, well, this is a new paradigm. You're doing psychedelic psychotherapy. You might never accept, you know, AI assisted cameras and neural helmets and all of this in your regular therapy because you'd be creeped out. But this all comes, you know, at the ground floor with psychedelic therapy. So just go ahead and surrender that sweet, sweet data to us.
Yeah.
All right, I'm going to continue here.
Cases for mental health issues. So I think like we all have this collective mental health issue. Again, for a disease we don't have a name for yet. It could be like, I don't have one, like it's not a good short name, but like being afraid of the future or don't feeling at home in the world anymore. So the outcome is though that
I got a point real quick here. Yeah. First of all, like just real quick, I want to crowdsource something. Christian Angermayer cannot figure out a really cool name for the disease where you're afraid of the future that the tech elite like him are building. So in the comments, if y'all could figure out what that disease is called, it would really help out Christian Angermayer's project.
You know, perhaps people have anxiety because there's absolutely no like stability in our environments anymore. There's no security, financial security. People don't have this anymore because of the world that he's helped build, that he champions, that he actively wants to continue to perpetuate in a government that he wants to not have there, unless it suits his own needs, of course.
Well, also, as Russ pointed out, like chronophobia is a thing, anticipatory anxiety is a thing, like, you know, futuritis from Alex. Like, I like
futuritis.
Tamara Lays, like, I don't know. Yes,
technophobia.
Keep it going.
Luddism.
There we go.
I'm extremely tribal. Because we try to find like refuge or like a home or like stability in a world of permanent instability, and it's not going to change. I mean, the world in 15 years or 10 years will be so different, meaning never ever we have a change which was happening so quickly. So we resort in this tribalism, which practically makes also now coming back to COVID, every rational discussion obsolete, meaning we completely lost the ability, I think, to be in the middle of something. Like it's always like in here, when we had all these discussions, like both sides, like in America, the Republicans or the right wing, the left wing, like, it's insane. And I think there is a more underlying reason, which is the one I just described.
Yeah, so that's why
I
wanted to
pause for a sec, because like just the articulation of his sort of imagining of right wing, left wing, or whatever, which he repeatedly evidences sort of an ignorance about what that signifies. But then it just like, to me, it's almost mind boggling, like that the sort of like the smallest semantic issue I might take there is like, you know, using tribalism when he means probably something closer to like factionalism. Like it's just picking through. It's just such a smorgasbord of bad thought that like I don't. I feel a little flabbergasted by that run, and of course with somebody like Dave Rubin on the other side, like you've got a nice sort of billboard to just kind of like, or a straight man to just kind of like nod and play it off as though that's all normal. And I just want to point out in the context of sort of entryism of this this right wing. I mean, Pace, earlier you were talking about Rubin as the new center. Like that's in that model of the ratchet effect, right? Where they present themselves as the centrists as things continue to slide right. And I just want to point out that
it's very self-conscious.
Right. And so having that straight man like Rubin just sort of nodding and agreeing and making space for all of this now in the broader psychedelic discourse, this is what that normalization of some of these more out there right-wing ideas looks like.
And I just want to say out loud, Eternui. Beautiful.
Eternui.
And
Ennui? Is that
Yeah, you've been saying Ennui.
I know.
A technolesia.
There we go. Technophobia. Future shock is off limits, but future.
You want?
Ennui.
I've been talking about it on the show for a while that it seems like we're at the end of one world and there's a new world on the horizon, but people are worried about it. We know about all the mental health stuff, but you were kind of in the psychedelic game before all of this was happening. Like you've been thinking about how do we make people happier and less depressed and with less anxiety and all that stuff for quite some time. When did you get interested in that?
I got interested, I can tell you exactly, in 2014 when I had my first own magic mushroom trip, which was in a country where it's legal. Which was
which country was that?
I always have to say the disclaimer.
Was that Holland? Where was that? Which country was that? That was Holland?
No, it was actually on a tiny island. It's called Canwan in the Caribbean.
Huh.
Yeah. So it's legal or not classified in most countries in the Caribbean, Latin America, and actually in the Netherlands. Like that's the interesting part. And so, and by the way, because I come to this in a point that I think psychedelics should be taken in a medical context, or at least with a guide. So I had a very good shaman doing it with me.
Okay, can I talk about that shaman point really quick? Because he just did an interview with the magazine Sifted fairly recently, I think, where he talks about how he was with, and maybe there was some kind of shaman there, I don't know, but in the Sifted article, it says he was with two of his friends. They had been on a yacht, I think, and then they went to this private island, and he kind of jokingly, in the article the interview, he has in quotes shamans, but he says my two friends, and he refers to them as shamans, and these two people are an artist and an actor, I believe, like an LA-based artist and an English actor, and he calls them his shamans. So when he's talking about this in another interview, you've got it there, don't you? Beautiful.
Yep. Yeah, he says he'll be eternally grateful to his two shamans, when he talks about this. I mean, and again, this goes to what we were talking about earlier about like the shifting narratives, right? Like earlier he mentions in one of these, he mentions that they were locally sourced mushrooms. In another interview, he claims that they were homegrown mushrooms by, I guess, Julian Morris and Landon Ross. I mean, the notion of getting a straight story out of Angermayer about what he's experienced when, with whom, like it seems kind of impossible.
Yeah, it's just trying to fill in some of the kind of gray area of, he's out there just promoting medicalization while he didn't use it in the way that he's actually advocating. So he's going backwards and just trying to, I was with two shamans. So it should only be medical or with a guide, but I was with a guide.
Well, what I think is an interesting thing to note is the notion of authenticity, one, in terms of his own story, but then reaching back to what we believe to be authentic claims about, indigenous practice. Because here's my big takeaway. A lot of psychedelic experience, for reasons due to history, due to cultural traditions, are just gentrifications of indigenous practices. To reach back and say your LA buddy club rat friends are somehow now shaman seems like an insult to their memory, much less an insult to the term shaman if you in fact respect that concept so much.
Yeah, totally.
Also, I don't know if anyone pointed out Michael Rose's comment that Christian Angermayer is an anagram of any scarier nightmare.
Oh my God. That's so good.
Wow, some gematria up in the chat. Love it.
I was
don't know if
already
anyone noticed, but
a very
Tacit
happy
turns I look like a straight-laced Post Malone.
There you go.
person. Yeah. So, and immediately after that, I was like, okay, if it can do this to me, yeah, a happy person, I can totally see why in the 50s, this was in 60s, actually some psychedelics were already legal in a medical.
No,
Yeah.
no.
Yeah.
In the 50s and 60s, some psychedelics were legal in a medical setting. Like, I'm gonna need a source for that. Like,
Yeah, facts matter. This is not correct.
yeah, we can just keep playing, but it's just
setting
not true.
against depression, whatever. But back then, depression was not a big thing. So I was like, it must be that I was very sure actually people would work on it now because this was so powerful. And then,
All right, I got to pause here. People have been working on it. Like, they were working on it. There wasn't like nobody working on any of this.
and actually for 2 years I was looking around. Are there any companies I can invest in? There weren't. And then I did it myself.
I should tell
So
you.
actually, can you pause that for a second as well? Because I wanna say again, this narrative is at odds with his buddy and coworker Lars Christian Wild. So here we have Angermayer basically saying after 2014, you know, he sort of went and made it happen. At the time, you know, we would be talking Compass and then Atai as like funding Compass Pathways. You know, Lars has said basically, oh, who's Christian? He's just an investor. He's this, he's that, he's the other. And like, again, you have a clear case where like he's saying there wasn't, incorrectly, but like there weren't people working on this. Certainly there weren't places he could invest. He could have donated, but he then went and like put his money towards making some of that happen. And for some of his coworkers to be sort of claiming that that's not the case, or playing cutesy games where somehow that's an alternative reality, like it just doesn't hold up.
Yeah, and notably too, the people he hooked up with, George and Katya, to start investing in psychedelic for-profit ventures, were perfectly aware that work was going on throughout all this time too, because they were kind of poaching information from universities and nonprofits before they decided to flip to a for-profit Compass Pathways, and there was some drama there too. So,
yep.
Well, and what's more important too, before you hit play again, is that this is something that has played out not just in the psychedelic space, but largely in the pharmaceutical space as well. There's like a one-to-one parallel between how this happens. Basic research is often done by government labs, the NIH, patents done, then established, and then cornered later on by private entities and by, you know, startup-y types using tech transfer offices at their university to launch their companies. You know, that this is a known pattern and a known pattern of behavior, both for the worse, really, in both pharmaceuticals as well as in psychedelics.
I've done magic mushrooms many times, and it's been a while, but I've always loved doing it. I never had a bad effect. I wasn't depressed after anything. If anything, it's exactly what you're saying. It sort of elevates the good stuff.
Well, gee, he didn't take it with a therapist in a medical setting.
I think throughout this. Oh, sorry. Go on, Pace.
Oh, I just want to point out that, I mean, without going into too much detail, I mean, this is a cultural gatekeeper of the right wing. He's a hub of this space, and there have been some papers published in the last couple of years that have argued that psychedelics are going to make you more liberal. And this is an object example of that just not being the case.
About you also is that you're basically, but I don't want to put words in your mouth, you're basically politically a conservative. And I think it's kind of, there's like this dichotomy between, wait a minute, he's a conservative, but also he's the magic mushroom guy. I sort of say that's what the new sort of conservative thing is. So can you talk a little bit about that, and then how you went ahead and said, okay, we're going to make this into a business?
Yeah, maybe pause real quick.
I agree with him. I think that is what the new conservative is going to be, and I think we're seeing it real fast.
Yeah, getting that confirmation from Dave Rubin is like it feels like unfortunately validating to what things like Pace of people like Pace have been writing about and stuff for us, and talking about like the right wing connections to psychedelia and all of that.
One thing that we've talked about quite a lot recently, a thing that I have been thinking about a lot recently, is that where does the initial psychedelic project to mainstream, the concerted effort was to bring in the right through Support the Troops, police. Rick Doblin has been lobbying a variety of conservative politicians, Matt Gaetz, Crenshaw, they had
Rick
meetings.
Perry.
Trump, Perry, Jeb Bush, Pence. So that, you know, because the story that was told is, oh, once we get the right on board, there'll be political momentum to make these changes, and then we'll reach the promised land, right? And then it'll suddenly just become this mainstream thing, and the history ends, the story just ends. But it doesn't. And so where is it going to move from here?
It's almost Scarface like, you know, first we get the money, then we get the power, then we get the psychedelics, you know. I don't quite understand. Scarface was another movie that perhaps Christian has not seen, because it does not end poorly. It does not end well, rather.
So TM just said in chat, when did MAPS really push in on this approach? They've been doing it for quite a while. I think some of the people and faces, I forgot Steve Bannon on there. Some of the people and faces have become more clear in the last year or two, and MAPS ended up hiring. It's funny because when you go on the MAPS website and the policy team, Jonathan Lubecki is not mentioned in there. Their main liaison to conservative circles named Jonathan Lubecki, and he's not. I don't think he's not an employee. He's independently contracted, I believe, and he's the one that has been meeting with various Republicans and right-wing type people, and he's
been acknowledged, though. I know he's been acknowledged as somehow having like a working relationships with MAPS on their website someplace.
Absolutely, but he's not listed on their page. He's sort of like kind of kept away, a little buried. Bit.
Well,
Rebecca Mercer, forget her too. Sorry.
Yeah. Both to TM and Taciturn. So Taciturn says, God, police with PTSD could definitely benefit from psilocybin therapy. And sort of laying aside the question of efficacy and, you know, because we've only seen really small scale studies and all of that. So if we assume that or you know, believe that psilocybin therapy does, you know, sort of across the board is shown to be effective and evidence-based, you know, combined with evidence-based therapies results in like effective or marked decreases in PTSD, I think the question then becomes like, where do we place emphasis? And like in the case of police, like are we using psilocybin therapy to help people who have decided to stop upholding the sort of white supremacist you know, structure of society and enforce the rules of you know, or the laws of our cultures or of our societies down the barrel of a gun, you know? Or are we basically providing maintenance therapy? And in 2006, Doblin, there's a quote that I have in an article that I'll share shortly, where Doblin said, I started thinking about how traumatic it would be for a police officer to see the murdered body of a pregnant woman. I experienced some compassion for the police. Now, when I read that quote, to me, the focus there was a little bit off. Like, I can understand having empathy for the police officer discovering that. I would also imagine I would have thoughts and concerns about that woman's family and all of that. And that was, to go to TM's point, that was in 2006. So we're looking, 15-ish years ago at that point. And I would guess it preceded that. But sorry, Sarvesh.
Oh, no, I just wanted to add on to your point, too, about, you know, considering this scenario where the police are given psilocybin therapy for PTSD, you know, a guy like Christian, for example, is opposed to explicit decriminalization and wants medicalization in the way that he wants it. So you'll have this weird split brain thing happening where police, the people who are enforcing the carceral state, now have some access to tools that can lessen the despair that they feel in executing their job, whereas there is an entire black market that is criminalized and not able to access those,
I have a direct response to that. In a paper written by Tehseen Noorani, he discusses this situation as a scheduling bifurcation. And it's already present if we talk about, amphetamine and Adderall, or more specifically Desoxyn and methamphetamine, the whole constellation of legal opiates and that which is found on the street. Point well taken.
To be clear, the scheduled bifurcation is what's going to happen with MAPS MDMA.
Yes.
It's not.
Yeah, Russ did some great reporting on that as well. Sorry, Normie.
Yeah, so when MDMA gets approved, I'm not sure if I don't think it's been determined yet whether that MDMA gets bumped down to Schedule 2 or Schedule 3, but the only MDMA that would be rescheduled is MAPS MDMA in that case. The MDMA that you have on you get from your friends or whatever, that's still completely illegal. All right, let's get back into this.
All right, so first of all, Benny, totally fine. Sorry, I actually would say I'm rational.
I think he said, first of all, fine, I'm totally okay being a conservative there.
He did.
And and it's like, I think one of the big problems is already that I think we're still using terms which don't fit in our time anymore. There should be no left and right, because left and right, I always tell my friends who are like in Germany and the Social Democrats are like, I tell my friends, look, you should have gone home in the 80s because you won.
Yeah.
If 100 years back, there were a real issue for the working class. Yeah. So then
now there's
someone.
Let's pause.
But he's going to go on to talk about the issues of the working class. So I don't know what he's saying here at all.
Let's just signpost real quick. Apple factories have suicide nets to prevent people from, actually killing themselves at work. So they have to actually go home and do it.
And that's not to forget the idea of like karoshi in Japanese society, literal death from overwork. I mean, we have so many different terms to describe the same sense of malaise, like whether it be gig economy workers being reclassified as independent contractors in California with Prop 18, or not Prop 18. I think it was that. Yeah. Uber, DoorDash, everyone, the precariat as opposed to the proletariat,
Well, and even looking at the things that people might associate with like old labor movement of like miners and shit like that, like looking at what's gone on in coal mines with deregulation, with mine operators and owners like refusing to engage in appropriate like upkeep and like safety measures. We've seen some really horrific working conditions in recent years. Again, in those locations that might be associated with the labor movement of 100 years ago. So the notion that, there were 100 years ago, there were issues, and then in the 80s you guys won, and why are you still here? It's absurd.
So intentionally
Let's hear where he takes it, though.
Yeah, let's hear it. Hear the man out.
You reached everything. You should have reinvented yourself. Funnily, but that's another topic. Actually, there would be a place for real social, in a positive. I know socialists in English always have this negative. We call it social democrats, like center socialist, because I think never ever then in the last 60 years than today, the working class has a real issue because their jobs gonna vanish, all of them, 100%.
Yeah. This is what Tucker's always talking about.
How can I help?
Listen, everyone.
It's never good when you're like,
Tucker,
that's what Tucker Carlson's always talking about.
Carlson, yeah.
The champion of the working class.
The real working class. How can we create
The real working class as opposed to, I don't know who.
And this comes back to my worry about the mental health state. We have to create a world where we all have a place. Because let me take one analogy, which is not a nice one, but to sort of paint a negative picture, because we had all of that. I searched for like a time which is sort of similar to ours. If you go in the time 1850 to 1910, 1915, there are so many parallels. The elites were completely tech savvy. You had this enormous optimism. You had Berlin, by the way, being an incredibly liberal city. The elite was in a collective happiness.
Yeah.
But 95% of the people were most likely thinking, you're fucking crazy, because they were all farmers. Yeah, and it was the dawn. So we were moving from an agrarian culture or agrarian society into the industrial age. This was the evening, or the eve of the industrial age. Yeah. So, but unfortunately, in that industrial age, a lot of the people who were needed in the agrarian age were redundant. So again, like the same like
Right,
today.
very much to what's happening now.
So what?
Just
Anyone wanna take
a
this?
quick thing about. I just wanted to say something about the whole, like, I don't know what word to use for it. It's this sort of, again, back to the authoritarian sort of leanings in the psychedelic space. There's this idea that the elites get to decide what the best structure of the world is, and everyone else, it's just a matter of accommodating them to that inevitable what's best as determined by the elites. And it's not a democratic process. It's like they're not interested in hearing it. He's presenting this arc of history as a natural, inevitable progression, whereas the current direction of concentration of wealth and power in the hands of the few is debatable. It's not something that needs to be inevitable, but he's basically implying that this is the way things are heading. They're just the chosen ones who are at the top of this hierarchical ladder, and we just need to make it easier for those at the bottom of the ladder to like come along where we're shepherding us into the future.
And the point that he, I think, goes on to make is that we need to do that so we don't start World War III either.
Well, and
I want to say real quick. I just want to say, just pay attention to his framing throughout. It assumes that these like podunk peasants are wrong.
Right. Well, and the thing that I wanted to point out is this sort of degraded Marxist analysis, where he's really like describing a dialectic between different forms of society, which we've heard before. I mean, I heard that in like AP World History, or college classes or whatnot. But like saying it without saying it, it's like it's a sleight of hand, and he's like, I'm going to talk about being a conservative, but here I'm going to use a Marxist analysis of dialectics to talk about how, when you combine two types of societies, something new emerges and it leaves others people behind in the process.
Yeah, well, and also if you look at this sort of broad period, right, he sort of starts out with like a 60-year period and then sort of extends it to like a 100-year period. I mean, it includes the 1920s, right? It includes the point where things were so bad, not only did you have people literally bombing Wall Street, but like we're talking about the Gilded Age. We're talking about the age of robber barons. We're talking about like, the points of such massive social and economic iniquity that like we saw state intervention in order to try to minimize some of the horribly antisocial effects of that structure. And yeah, I mean, I don't know if it was cut out or if it's still upcoming, but like his framing of political systems such as nationalism and communism, and
I think that's probably right next. Yeah,
it's just he continues to be and is so consistently ahistorical yet so confident in his like fact-free sort of narratives. I find it mind-boggling, but yeah, I guess let's let him keep talking.
What did the people do? They invented kind of nationalism, and they invented communism.
So again, this is he's claiming that nationalism and communism were invented in 1850 or somewhere in that 1850 to 1910, 1950 period, which is just not true. Like there's not, it's like it's not even worth debunking beyond that. Like, you know, shorthand, you could say like people might tie signposts to the French Revolution, to the American Revolution, like both of which significantly predate that. For nationalism, I mean, for communism, you can go back even farther. So like, it's like, it's such a vague, incorrect generalization that it's like to debunk that, it's like, where do you even begin? Like it's just counter to, as I understand, you know, history.
We're resorting to, to actually sort of get a little bit of healing from their anxiety and their fear, and that actually gave the world 2 world wars. So my fear is that if we're not finding a way to take 100% of humanity with us, I mean like the tech elite who says, hey, we're going to go to Mars. And by the way, I do think we're going to go to Mars. Like, but like, if we don't take all the people with us,
all the people,
it's going to end very badly, because I can say it again, like fear brings out the worst in that. And that comes then back to psychedelics. Because
so, wait, let's pause for 1 second, then we'll get into the psychedelics part.
Okay. So when I first heard this, because I want to be fair, when I first heard this, like I was like, oh, he completely missed the deep space radiation and the fact that like bringing people to Mars like has like major like material obstacles. He gets into some of that. I won't spoil his solution for that. But the notion that the tech elites need to bring 100% of humanity with them. I mean, hell, just looking at the relationship between the sort of broad, like between the general population of Earth and the so-called tech elite, like those are not social dynamics that I would like to see replicated on Earth, let alone Mars. And so, you know, it just like, I don't know.
Well, and it's kind of a classic like Brave New World situation where the fact of an underclass is taken for granted, and we just need to like find a way of accommodating the underclass, getting their kind of engineering their consent to the boot, and just, you know, there's no question of that hierarchy as being, again, not to harp on this point, but natural and inevitable.
Well, not to tie into another literary reference too, you know, speaking of classic libertarian hard SF, Robert Heinlein's The Moon is a Harsh Mistress posited a specific colony on the Loon, in their case for mining helium-3, but what ended up happening once you started industrializing another planet is that you formed an underclass there because they did not have the same resources as you had on Earth. And so, you know, you have an inability to eliminate the same social dynamics that you're trying to create in a utopian vision when you send a bunch of people to Mars. Like it just doesn't work that way. In Heinlein's book, that was a revolution that took place.
I also want to point out that the communists didn't cause World War II. Extreme right-wing fascists like started World War II and then murdered and imprisoned the communists. That's what happened.
But they were called National Socialists. Sorry.
I love this. So are you shocked how the tech elite seem to hate the regular person? Like if you ask the regular person, like, what do you think the head of Twitter or Facebook or all these people think about you? They think, oh, they want to censor us. They don't want us to speak freely. They want to own our data and all of that stuff. So you're trying to basically rectify that.
So what do you think that the ordinary people hate the?
So first of all, this is Rubin trying to get Christian to play with some of his pet issues, you know. So I mean, if we go back to thinking about like when Jack Dorsey was on Joe Rogan, you know, there was just this like conversation about how their policies were really designed to only ban conservatives for their speech. And, you know, was it the speech about small government? No. Was it the speech about traditional values? No. It was that other speech, you know, the speech that we're talking about, you know. But I mean, this is like Rubin and the IDW and a number of these like sort of griftery types, they do like for all of their like snowflaking that they project out, they really do complain a lot, whether it's about getting Trump getting banned from Twitter and Facebook for like inciting an insurrection. Trump, who was recently on Rubin, or Rubin kind of like trying to play the underdog, where he's like somehow being shadow banned. Like, I'm putting out tweets that should be getting more likes. Like, I must be on some list. It's very much a pet issue, and it's kind of fun to see Christian Angermayer like try and be like a gracious guest, but completely dodge the question. So
tech people or the other way around?
I think it's a little bit of both, but I consider myself more of the regular person. I think the average person thinks that the big tech people just basically think that they're fodder for whatever their algorithms want and however they can make money, something like that.
Well, meaning one other theory, and I'm copying that, what I'm saying now, because it's not my original thought, but like one of the things what Yuval Harari coined was this idea that if humanity, I don't want to say goes bad, because I still don't know, I have not reached a conclusion
that negative
if it's like
thought.
good or bad or neutral, but it could be hindsight, like in 100 or 200 years, we might look at this time and say we have split up in two species.
Stop. So first of all, Yuval Harari is the author of *Sapiens*, classic thought leader. First of all, but second of all, like, wow, are we like now talking about like Morlocks? I mean, I don't know. There are ways to think about like futurists have often thought like, okay, if you go into space, you might need to do some genetic alteration, and that's kind of where he's going. But in light of the rest of his class politics, it's a pretty bad look.
We're also going to have two species in like 100 years span.
Yeah, why just two species?
Because one are the nervous agrarians, and the other ones are the ones that are cool with brain implants, obviously.
Because you have a part of the humanity who says, hey, bring it on. Let's fly to Mars. And by the way, one very simple fact, if you want to go to Mars, we're going to need to change our body, because our body is not made for not even Mars travel, not to talk about space travel. Yeah, you die of cancer within some weeks. Yeah. So if we want to go to Mars, it's not just going to Mars. We're going to have to modify, and nobody's talking about that, but I think everybody knows it.
Right. So that's the whole transhumanism movement, basically.
Exactly. So, and by the way, and it's going to happen because we already have it. You have a heart, if you have a stent, I think it's called in English, yeah, so it is already a mini technological intervention. And somehow we go comfortable. And we're gonna get more and more and more. But there might be a part of the humanity who says, this is not for me. Yeah, I don't wanna merge with machines. And again, this sounds already so sci-fi, but it's gonna gradually happen. So humanity might split into species, and in 50 years, 100 years, we're gonna look back and say, and that's already sort of in a mini way happening now, because you have these one part of humanity who wants sort of go wider, further, the sky's the limit, let's bring it on. And then you have, I know what I said, the other part who maybe doesn't really.
He's trying to hide his disdain for the little people here, the plebs here.
Hang on a sec. I think Sarvesh wanted to say something and then paste.
So here's a really interesting thing. It's actually, I didn't realize I'd be able to drop the knowledge. When I was in college and immediately afterwards, volunteered for an org called the Society for Space Synthetic Biology. And we submitted a letter to the National Academies of Sciences telling them to consider synthetic biology, which is, think of it as genetic engineering on steroids, to their roadmap for what we were planning on doing, whether to the moon, whether to Mars. And, the notion that we're just going to have to transhumanly, go full transhuman in order to just make it to Mars is asinine. If you can like, for example, the material costs of sending someone to Mars can be greatly reduced if you just freeze bacteria that can fix the Mars soil and generate carbon from it. And you could grow anything from potatoes. I mean, we had a Matt Damon movie about exactly this, you know? The idea that we need to go to Morlocks and the people on the surface is, I just don't know where he gets it. But I mean, if it feeds into, and I'm going to use this term because we were talking about in the chat, anarcho-transhumanist dipshitism, like, so be it, man. Like, you do you.
Totally. So I mean, we've talked a lot. We're talking about futurism here. They're talking about futurism, and I mean, I wanna just say that the person who's thought the most, and I think this is pretty like uncontroversial in the science fiction world about Mars travel is an author named Kim Stanley Robinson, who wrote Red Mars, Green Mars, Blue Mars, and also 2312. By the time you get to 2312, he is talking about speciation, but it's ironic in the context of this conversation. Kim Stanley Robinson effectively predicts like a Martian communist revolution, and then they actually come back to Earth to help Earth that's falling apart deal with their problems. Yeah.
There's also two components of that little run that Angermayer went on. One is this notion of inevitabilism, like this will happen, and it will happen because I'm saying it will happen, and frankly, like I've got the capital to throw at it to try to do my damnedest to make it inevitable. But then two, like when he starts talking about what we've got and sort of the notion that this sort of transhumanist push is natural, it runs into other comments he's made elsewhere where he claims that aging is unnatural as a result of an apparent misunderstanding about how DNA functions and a bunch of rundowns about like how human lifespan should be extended to hundreds and hundreds of years because that would be natural. And so the way that he uses natural to sort of present biological processes as being unnatural at some times, but the notion of like a transhumanist, merging bodies with machines in order to achieve space travel in service to the tech elite as natural. Like there are so many fundamental political, biological, technological assumptions that go into that assertion that it again, like I just like to tease that all apart and understand from him what, if anything, is actually informing those positions.
And I don't think he has a predictive capacity that he thinks he does. I'll just come out and say it,
And then you have, I know what I said, like the other part who maybe doesn't really, I don't want to say intellectually because this sounds degrading, but right. I just
might sound
a positive
elitist.
Example, and I really mean it positive. And sorry, by the way, I'm not an English speaker, so yeah. So
you're doing all right. You're doing all right.
A lot of political correctness things because I always can say I didn't mean it that way.
He can always say he didn't mean it that way. You heard it here, folks.
Kind of cynical, if you ask me.
Driver. So he or she maybe can't explain you how autonomous driving works. Yeah. But somehow, I think humans always have a very good gut feeling. So as a collective, we're actually pretty smart. And somehow the bus driver knows this is not going in the right direction. I'm not going to be a bus driver in 10 years. Yeah. And that, again, makes him maybe resent the people. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, again, it comes back. We need to sort of take him or her or whatever, like on this sort of thing.
I want to point out real quick that it seems like Christian is arguing for the bus drivers resenting the tech elite. Going back to Dave Rubin's question.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's also worth pointing to sort of riff on some old Chomsky, that like in the case of imagining bus drivers and autonomous driving, like the way technology gets used in that situation, ignoring, let's say for the moment, like the sort of inputs for the manufacture and operation of buses and the computer systems and all of that, but like just looking at operating those buses in an autonomous manner, like you could sort of outsource that to Uber and have Uber just extract value from your city's sort of public transit. Or you could create a system in which like the bus drivers and folks who currently make that run, you know, are able to still function in some sort of collective around sort of public transit, and where, you know, that's run as a public service where, you know, whatever sort of autonomous, because you also have issues with the data and the management around all of that, right? Like there are ways where this can be run as public services, public goods, run in the interest of the workers and the people who actually, like, you know, as we've seen in the context of pandemic, you know, who's actually essential, right? Or you can have this more extractive thing where you get resentment from the bus drivers towards the tech elite because that's a fundamentally extractive endeavor. So even the way, going back to that inevitabilism notion, the way that he is constructing the world around him is one in which he is inherently sort of baked in onto that winner extractivist side.
Okay, so now link that to psychedelics for me.
First of all, I don't have an answer on that, like fully, like, because I just think like, but I think the bigger fear what I have is that we don't even discuss the problem. We discuss so many bullshit stuff. I think this is your point. Yeah, this is the point of a lot of friends we have, that a lot of discussions, if you see the real issue, like, or the real problems, yeah, a lot of discussions are really absurd because they're like, why don't so? But again, I see it rather through the lens that I'm like, okay, I understand why the people have this discussion. Take all the identity politics.
Hang on. What's the real problem? He doesn't name it.
But he can't think the negative thoughts anyway. So how is he able to even like wade into, and as John Hanna has pointed out in chat, you know, if he's never seen a movie with a negative ending, perhaps he doesn't wish to accept death as a reality. And he's certainly made comments on other podcasts precisely to those ends. So bingo,
yeah,
John.
I was laughing the other day that he always talks about how his first mushroom trip made him realize his deep fear of death, and that's kind of an underlying fear of everything. And that turned him on to longevity science so that he doesn't have to die, which is not exactly the conclusion I think everyone takes away from that revelation on psychedelics. But
I mean, he's saying here that like all that's being discussed is the bullshit. There are plenty of people who are actually discussing real things like economic fallout and like the system. But he doesn't go into he doesn't go into discussing. He starts talking about identity politics. Someone's messing with me.
It is again another form of tribalism. How in the 1850s and following, the people invented communism, so to say, and nationalism. Now we're inventing other crazy stuff.
Wrong again.
Psychedelics come into it. So where do I start? Because it's like, it's very, so one thing why I'm always a little bit not hesitating, like, so it's very hard, and I have to describe a psychedelic trip first.
Yeah. I was going to ask you, please.
And in a certain way, it's extremely spiritual. You could also say religious, you could say. So the thing is, it's very mystical, yeah? And practically every word, our language is not made to it's really outerworldly. You sort of leave the realm of something and go to another one. So what I want to say is, like, the language is not so easy. This is why, by the way, most religions are based on.
I don't know what's going on at this point anymore. Like, seriously, I don't know what's being discussed. We're talking about.
Hang on. He's about to get to the good stuff.
Wait. I just want to clarify for people wondering why Dave's like going like nope about the the origin of communism happening in like the 1850s. Like, go back 200 years, go back further, look at indigenous models. But I mean, even in Europe, you had the diggers and the true levelers. Like, this is in the mid 16th century, people talking about land reform,
Totally.
All right, we'll go back to this. But I just wanted to point out, I don't know what's going on. We're talking about bus workers and working class and going to Mars, and it's so all over the place. It's like you just drop the bin that has all these wires. I don't know what's going on anymore.
He's going to tell us how every religion is psychedelic. Oh, sorry, Nishay.
It's like he was starting to get into my research area with the you know, we don't have existing language. Like when I was watching this, it was like my ears were picking up. But then he like short circuits it to be like, therefore religion.
Psychedelics, provenly, including Christianity.
So
and
he just said most religions
use these pictures and describe
have been
things like.
proven.
You want me to go back just a few seconds?
Yeah, rewind. Yeah.
Some psychedelics, provenly, including Christianity. And this is why they all use these pictures and describe things like the burning chair, or chariot, which goes in the air, whatever, because they can't put actually their experience really in words because there are no words to describe a psychedelic trip. That's first. Yeah. So, and if I do it, then I need to use religious terms. And the problem is that religious terms, in our world especially, are incredibly loaded. So if I use the word soul, then you might think think about, and I do, and another person, either God, whatever. So I try to stay as neutral and try for the viewers to make a little bit of an abstraction and don't think necessarily in the narrow terms of any religion, but in a wider meaning.
So can you pause? I just want to point out that there are actually both as far as Nishé's research goes, but then if you spend time on drug forums and you engage with people who are sort of chatting about their experiences, the notion that you have to use religious language to discuss this is just not true. And talking about soul, there are entire discussions of out-of-body experiences in which soul never features. Whether it's discussions about dissociation and discussion around Kehoes, whether we're talking about DMT or 5-MeO experiences, and sort of how people make sense of that experience of a disembodied self. And then discuss as well, even going back to McKenna and the way that he discusses those out-of-body experiences with intact ego versus conversations about egoless out-of-body experiences. The notion that there has to be an appeal to soul or religiosity in this just doesn't hold for me at all. And Nishé, this literally, trip reports and the way that language factors into psychedelic experiences, this is your bread and butter, no?
Well, and that's what is just so funny. Oh, sorry.
Sorry, I'm lagging.
What? Oh, I was going to say this. What's so funny about the field is that you can have people thinking deeply and researching a topic for years and years, and then someone shows up with a bag of money, and suddenly they're the expert. It just, I don't know. It's a lot sometimes.
Yeah.
Psychedelics. You have a part in your brain which constitutes your ego. And this part is, depending which psychedelic you take, is either really reduced to zero or at least heavily regulated down. So it's called default mode mechanism.
So, he's not the only sort of non-neuroscience person who gets into these attempts to describe frameworks like the default mode network or the sense of where the ego is situated in the brain. But this goes, I think, directly to Nishé's point about showing up with a bag of money and then just being put in that position to opine. And the fact that he can't say, I don't know, the fact that he can't say this isn't my area of expertise, instead he offers this majorly butchered sort of explanation for what's going on. I think it does a real disservice. And the fact that he would not only do that, but also have the audacity to talk about how nobody was engaged in research sort of until he showed up and started throwing his money around, and then engage in such a butchering of the existing research. Just not good.
So practically in this part of the brain, there is something which tells you are Dave, and this is Christian. We have a different history. You have all the happiness you received. You have all the pains, all the scars. Everything which makes Dave Dave is there. Yeah, and that goes down again, very down or to zero. Mm-hmm. And interestingly, in the same moment you doing that, something else is emerging, or at least is heard. Maybe it's always there philosophically, but you realize it again, hear it, see it, feel it, and now we can call that a soul, we can call that a inner voice, we can call that your subconsciousness. Yeah, it must not necessarily, I'm not saying it proves, by the way, that God is there, that's another discussion. Yeah, but that is definitely what 100% of the people have.
100%.
100%, definitely.
Soul and sort of universal feeling gives you a lot of insights. So, and if I try a little bit to make the main ones, the first one is, which is, by the way, super important, I think, for everybody, is it shows you who you really are and what you really want. So it might sound as a simple question.
Okay, we gotta stop because, like, seriously, how many people have had an absolutely confusing existential scrape fest of a trip and come out not knowing up from down? Like, the idea that psychedelics somehow always like reveal your true self and what you really want, like, I would talk to a lot less confused people. I would have been less confused in earlier parts of my life if Christian Angermayer's account were at all true. It's not true. The psychedelic experience can sometimes present a wildly inaccurate map of reality. And it
can, in the moment where you say, "Oh my God, this is it. This is real. This is the truth with a capital T," and you feel it so much, and you say, "Don't forget this when you come back down." And when you come back down, you realize, "Oh shit, I was just like that. That was nuts." Like, for me to think that, I don't know how you could trust in that state being so real and be so confident about that.
And I want to say that, like, look, there are things that don't always translate, and I don't want to discount strange experiences that people have that they are not able to communicate. I do want to thank Zeph for the super chat. Incredible, really helpful stuff.
Yeah, thanks so much for that. That's awesome. Thanks so much for subscribing. Yeah, if anyone else isn't subscribed, definitely, and if you want to stay up to date with conversations like this, please feel free. But I just wanted to also just mention that in terms of, I really dislike the framing of getting to your true self. And I mentioned in a previous stream the Millier paper about ego loss as like a multi-dimensional phenomenon, and there's like different aspects of selfhood, like the embodied facets of self and the narrative self that projects into the past and future, and these different elements of self are actually like variously toggleable on and off, and so it's not actually an on-off switch, or that you're just kind of like revealing some permanent truth behind a false exterior. So, but you can see that he's really presenting these ideas as if this is represented by the neuroscience, and that's just not the case.
Yeah, we're getting into panacea territory here.
Totally. And I just went ahead and threw the Millier paper, the Looking for the Self, Phenomenology, Neurophysiology, and Philosophical Significance of Drug-Induced Ego Dissociation, in the chat. Sorry, dissolution, not dissociation.
People don't know, or if they know, they are afraid of accepting it in any form. It can be simple stuff. I had people who took psychedelics who were extremely wealthy and realized the only thing I want is spend more time with my family, but I didn't dare to say it because I'm running this big corporation or whatsoever. Anyway,
simple shit.
You perceive it on a level that it's an absolute truth. You come out of it and like, okay, I realize now what I want, and I'm going to change my life in a way that I'm happy. Yeah. So that is one big part, is that sort of really.
Also kind of dangerous to make life-changing decisions when you're coming down from a trip or really close proximity to tripping. You shouldn't make huge decisions like that at that point in time. And the fact that he's advocating that as like a good thing, like therapists and people who are around this all the time, like, don't get divorced right now. Like, chill.
Yeah, give it
Steve,
some
I feel like
months.
I've heard you talk
know.
about that being in the DMT Nexus guidelines and stuff too.
Yeah. Oh, it was straight up in there. I mean, the notion that like those big revelations you have, especially in the wake of like a breakthrough that completely like shatters your ontological frameworks. Like if you come down and you realize you want to totally reorient your life, like sit with it for a week, a couple weeks, a month, a couple months,
30
and like
days,
see,
at least.
like, you know, like that stuff will hold up if it's meaningful, if it's relevant, if it's not just, you know, pharmacologically induced sensations of awe or desires to shift things around. And like there's plenty of things like, you know, if you get a message that like, you know, you're out of shape and you want to go work out, by all means go to the gym. But like if we're talking about, you know, the notion that your entire life needs to be upended and resorted, like that takes quite a bit of consideration and effort in regular life.
Realization of your true self. Also the negatives, also the painful ones. So it's incredibly trauma healing. A trip must not be nice. It's not a party trip. It's nothing you want to do.
A trip must not be nice. Okay.
No,
How does
it's
that
positive.
fit with his?
Hang on.
Yes.
Yeah. So one, I think it's an ESL thing. Like I think he's saying like a trip doesn't have to be nice. But he then goes on to say it's not a party thing. Like I think you should back that clip up and let it run for the full length.
Please
because
do. Please
this is
do.
a section where he both says he sort of comes out against the disco or the discotheque, I guess, because this is where we're at. And then like goes on and I think relays some of his own experiences. And there's a bunch to unpack around both aspects of that.
Yeah.
Nice. It's not a party trip. It's nothing you want to do at a disco. Yeah. So
Oh my God.
it can be extremely cathartic or extremely cleansing. Yeah. But you're always going to feel better after. Yeah. And I actually had very colloquially we say bad trips, but I like the word more challenging trips. But they were actually the nicest or the best ones, not the nicest ones, but the best ones, because they gave me so much, because I learned so much about, again, fears, whatever, which you try to hide very somewhere. Yeah, and you dissolve them.
This cliche is. I can't,
hit it, Normie. Come on, run down
I can't take the euphemism of challenging like experiences, minimizing adverse effects for like psychedelic experiences. There are experiences that are terrible that could have been prevented, that people should not have had, and we can talk about them that way as an adverse experience.
Yeah.
Not like, sure, are there difficult trips that there could have been something learned? Absolutely. I'm not saying that doesn't exist. But to just be so absolute about that as being like all bad fucking experiences are great or actually the best one is so dishonest in this space. And it's so motivated to make psychedelics palatable to a mainstream audience, to remove any of those adverse experiences. Yeah, exactly. Zendo has been like vanguard at pushing no bad trips, no adverse experiences, challenging experiences, and it's pissed me off for years now.
Yeah,
and it's just still front and center. It's got to go.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
There's a couple of things to unpack there. First of all, like the categorical bad trip, like good trip. It doesn't address what I consider to be part of the psychedelic central dogma, which is setting, but also dosage. Okay, and so I think there's something really like toxic and unhelpful about the idea that all adverse experiences are difficult, and then ultimately, no matter how much time it takes, like you'll come out better in the end. And I clearly don't think that's true, but there's a robbing of nuance to the discussion, in that in some ways this is why I think that some of the microdosing discussion is actually positive, because we're exploring lower ends of the dose response curve. But it's like, should people be thrown into the deep end with 5 hits of acid on their first trip? Like, I don't know, probably not. But regardless, like he started this little bit, talking about how this, like psilocybin mostly is what he's talking about. This is nothing to do in a disco. And I mean, are you serious? Like, this is where most people have had these experiences. This is the foundation of much of this psychedelic renaissance, is people having experiences in festivals and places like Burning Man or whatever. Michelle, what's going on?
I just wanted to add that part of my issue with the, bad trips are good actually, or like challenging trips are to be, sought after, is when that can slip into, needlessly traumatizing people because that's what's best for them, or like, you needed this experience, and kind of framing things, like putting people in risky situations where they end up dealing with stuff that was unnecessary, and then glorifying that as if it's some kind of like gift. There's a lot of that goes on in the ways that these types of things are talked about. So I just wanted to flag that.
No, and it's a super important point, and one that ties into lineages of psychedelic authoritarianism. I mean, we see this, so we can look into histories of MK Ultra and affiliated people, where you had dosing with psychedelics in order to cause essentially traumatizing or in an attempt to sort of blow somebody out of themselves, right, in order to return them to some sort of blank infantile state. There's also, Walter Houston Clark published, wrote a thing called Bad Trips May Be the Best Trips, in which he describes some authoritarian psychedelia in which, in my opinion, he's treated quite terribly, subjected to some really horrifying sort of psychedelic interventions, and is then, after going through all of that really intense experience, is then like dosed massively with ketamine. And then like in the ketamine experience, he decides that his torturers have now turned into angels, from devils to angels. And it's like, you can look at what's going on pharmacologically. You can look at like the states he's being subjected to, and the notion that like that the end, like the meaning making, that the therapist decides that this is good for you and gives you a narrative that, oh, because you get all of this material out of this challenging experience, this is somehow to your benefit, and ignore all of those moments in the experience where maybe you didn't want what I was doing to you, but now, hey, it's all good now, you've come through it, right? Like now you can integrate all of this into your life. There's some really disturbing stuff that can happen, and historically speaking, there's really disturbing stuff that has happened using those frameworks.
I don't like the pushing onto me that my most difficult. So there's not it's not like psychedelic experiences are their own thing. In one way they are, but they're experiences that you have, and they can be traumatic experiences that you have. And to tell me that my worst experiences in my life are actually my best experiences, I can make that decision for myself. that maybe a death in my family or someone close by, growing through that or whatever, could be a positive experience for me. That could also be a really negative experience to me, and it's none of your business to tell me that that's actually that should be the best experience in my life. And there's that sort of holier than thou kind of attitude that is all over the place in this field that I feel. And I think that would sound ridiculous to say if someone just died, someone close to you just died, a family or friend close to you, decide and say, hey, that's going to be the best experience of your life. That would be super obnoxious and fucked up to say to someone. But yeah, that's what's said all the time here. This is just challenging.
And this issue is, in my mind, continuous with our earlier discussion of the authoritarian logic behind the tech elites and like going to Mars as like kind of microcosm of that, because it's like the bad trip of the agrarians or whatever is decided in advance that this is actually what's best for you, and you need to just like embrace the challenge of just like loving the boot that's on your neck. And so they're related in my
the boot
opinion.
on your neck and the syringe in your arm. Don't
right,
worry
that ties
about
in
that.
with
That's the best experience of your life.
that ties in with Dustin's comments about, what about ketamine injected during arrests? Don't resist or else. And actually, I would say, Sarvesh, your point about Martin Ball, like this ties back into the notion of the therapist telling you what you need, right? Like,
I mean, so I would point to Elijah McClain's death, who was, a teenager on the spectrum, really kind of just a sensitive young man who happened to be black and was stopped by police, and he died in police custody after being injected with ketamine. It sounds like a really dark way to go, and I think that this is it's one of these things where ultimately, when it comes down to it, like why should police have the broadest possible access to all incapacitants? I think it's a horrifying thing.
Sarvesh, you want to?
Oh, I mean, I just wanted to kind of call back to some of the earlier reporting that Psymposia has done when it comes to Martin Ball, just because whether we're talking about psychedelic authoritarianism or whether we're talking about the corruption of the therapist mentee relationship or whatnot, there's obviously going to be a conflict of interest when the person has a vested interest in selling you a several $1,000 therapy for what would ordinarily be street drugs.
Yep.
All right, let's get back into this.
The second big thing, you feel connected to nature and other humans in a way you can't describe. And one other form, so there are several sources of mental health issues, if I'm being oversimplified. The one I already said is fear and trauma, yeah? And the other one is lost connections. A lot of people feel disconnected from everything, from the world, from people, whatever. And psychedelics bring back that enormous sort of love for the creation, if I want to say now, it's like for humans, animals. This is why, by the way, this is why a lot of people go vegan after that, or at least say, I want to be more responsible towards my environment.
So I think Nishay and Pace might have something to add to this. Not to put you on the spot.
Pace.
I put you on the spot. All right.
You did.
Why don't you say what you're thinking?
Yeah, go for it.
I was thinking that like the solution, the reason why so many people like are disconnected is because of the structure of our work and like the system that has been built for us that we're just trying to exist in. And the solution to that seems like maybe you're around your family and you don't leave your family all day long to go do some bullshit job that is totally meaningless. That would probably help that situation. And psychedelics as so you disconnected, take psychedelics. Oh, I'm actually really connected, and then I'm like suddenly gonna. You never changed any of the causes of that disconnection, but you can just think that you just realize that I'm actually really connected. I don't know. It's such a Band-Aid.
Well, he talks about that in.
Right.
No, please. But please. Angermayer talks about that in another interview. The one we opened with, I think it's the CEO Diaries one, where the interviewer asks him, "Do you think people are maybe feeling more depressed, less connected? Because like I look out my window and it's like a concrete jungle, and we're like losing connection to nature, we're losing connection to community." And Angermayer does kind of pitch psychedelics as just, we can continue doing that. We're always going to continue industrializing, but at least we have psychedelics to kind of get us back in touch with what it means to be human, which is a very optimistic way of looking at just that.
Well, it's a very Huxleyan way of looking at it's Soma. Mm-hmm. Oh, sorry.
Hit
play.
So I would sort of reply to this sort of situation is it's pointing to the fact that like insofar that psychedelics do, and they certainly don't always facilitate connection, that's usually when somebody sees a lack, a gap in their life that doesn't feel good, and that it spurs them to action to change something. Like it's not to change the relationship, to change a habit, right? conversely, you have people who isolate and go into a spiral, taking psychedelics with no connection, staring into the void, as it were, or the infinity. And these are all like contingent on things like intention and context and setting. And so yes, psychedelics absolutely can be used as tools to heal families and communities. I've seen some of these some examples that would lend evidence to that read, but it's a very intentional thing, and it's not something that you're going to buy, in a strip mall parking lot. It's not something that you're going to have a stranger facilitate for you. It's a personal and intentional and like disruptive thing. It's not something that it's just a chemical thing.
All right, let's continue this.
Yeah, I think Nishay might have had a follow-up though.
Yeah, quick follow-up. I just wanted to mention that it's kind of ironic that back in the early days of psychedelic medicine, like 10 years ago, there was a lot of talk about the difference between psychedelic medicine and more traditional like allopathic medicine is that you're addressing the root causes of suffering and not just masking over problems with like pain, killing, and other numbing, but actually dealing with the root causes. And paradoxically, like the way that Angermeyer's vision for psychedelic medicine is going, it's moving in that other direction, where rather than addressing these root causes of people's alienation and suffering from living under capitalism, etc., it's just, he's envisioning accommodating people to the inevitability of the capitalist realist system that we're living under.
Totally.
If I want to say now, it's like for humans, animals. This is why, by the way, a lot of people go vegan after that, or at least say I want to be more responsible towards my environment. The third one is in the weeks after, in a very simplified way, your brain is literally growing a bit. We call that neuroplasticity. Which helps you on the one side to develop habits or to get rid of habits. So it's extremely helpful if you want to get off an addiction, stuff like that. But also, if you look at brains after, the people seem to be more creative, and also more open for the world. And I think what we all have to go into this time with a sane mental health is like this awe, like this sort of, the future's gonna be fine.
Thanks.
Yeah, so I think it's worth pointing out, so I think he means neurogenesis rather than neuroplasticity. It's also worth noting that with regards to psychedelics, that's quite understudied in humans. I know there's a number of animal studies that make claims about it, but as we've pointed out before, you have to be real cautious when you attempt to translate animal studies into humans. Obviously, we've seen Angermayer is not particularly cautious, but then concluding with this notion that the future is going to be great.
Yeah, Billionaire telling people that the future is just going to be fine is so arrogant.
I mean, I studied climate change for 10 years. The future, it was 120 degrees in Siberia last week, and you melt the permafrost, you release the methane. That hasn't even been factored into some of the most worst case scenario models. I think methane's a runaway train.
To that point, Jim Gottler's comment comes in big time, and he says we all have a bias or lens through which we see everything. His happens to be capitalism.
Totally.
And I think particularly with how he's situated, it does make it kind of easy for him to look at his own scenario, his own circumstances, to recognize that he is resourced and well equipped enough that the future for him does look great. Whereas sure. I know people who are talking about questioning whether or not it makes sense for them to have kids, because when they look at the world, they have questions about what the future holds.
It's just a real lack of empathy for a lot of people is what I see when someone can proclaim that so confidently.
Or just simple ignorance.
I don't think it's ignorance on his part, really.
inconsidered.
Like, we just need to find a way to that. So, but if you tell that a 60-year-old, even leave away whatever the job is, so unfortunately, if you look at the brain, people always think of the aging of the body, but our brain, round about when you're 30, is starting to age, not just in a sort of mental capacity that you're losing gradually a little bit, but also you're literally closing down. Like, if you go like in an old people's home, why do people not make friends? You would say they have time, they have the whole day, they should make a lot of friends, yeah? You literally can't. Your brain is not wired anymore. So you make your friends in your 20s, yeah, when you're open, so I mean, for example, all my friends I have, but I make new friends all the time because I think I'm always on psychedelics. So psychedelics, the creativity.
Well, we became friends in the last 2 years. Now, I don't know if you were tripping at the time, but
Case, did you want to say something?
Let it go for just a minute more.
So if I look at what we need, we need to have the discussion that we, let's say the elite or we as the world, we need to offer a world where these people, I said like the sort of the lower level jobs, where
the more
we find new jobs for them.
So okay, let's talk about that real quick. So I mean, I don't know if we actually included this in the video, but like ultimately what he's talking about is like when you tell a 60-year-old, oh, you have to go back to university to get retrained for your job. First of all, let's talk real quick about the age bracket that we're talking about. Just basic New Deal or Social Democrat, the people who won in Europe, according to Christian Angermayer. If you're 60, nobody's retraining you. You're retired, or at least you should be. That's not the case for many in the United States. That's not been the case for people that I have known. But the idea that's the default, that first of all, that we're going to use psychedelics to retrain people by using neuroplasticity or neurogenesis or whatever, is like interesting, big if true, I would say. The other thing is just what is he talking about? Like, I have a parent who's who's older and has made more friends in his golden years than he did as a working person. Like what are we talking about here? This is ridiculous. Like, is he citing studies? Like, I don't understand. I don't get it. Like, they literally can't make friends. What a weird idea.
I think it just kind of shows he's kind of dropped breadcrumbs throughout this interview of different areas that they're looking for that are not like in the current mental health, like the DSM right now. Getting people prepared for the workforce, keep them in the workforce longer, create some new mental health disorder or whatever.
Even if they're not in the workforce,
he's forecasting areas.
Right. If you create a condition, old friend atrophy associated with old age, we've got a novel tryptamine that'll, address that problem. I mean, because the narratives certainly don't match the older folks I know, and the, rather rich social lives they lead, and the new friends that I've watched. In some cases, like the friends I've made who are decades older than me. And the other thing that comes up too is like the way in which he like presents this as a reality, and then immediately like he bucks that trend, right? Like it's not true for me, because I'm tripping or because I'm on psychedelics or whatever. Like, it's just, it would be funny if he didn't wield as much power as he does.
That's the thing with everyone has biases, but like when you are a millionaire or a billionaire, your biases get imposed on everyone else, and other people don't have the same power to challenge those biases.
Michelle Bronstein has proposed a new DSM category, Cluster B, psychedelic billionaires.
Sounds like a pathogenic, extremely antisocial condition.
But at the same time, we need to make sure that they want it, by the way. So, and again, telling a 60-year-old, look, you know what, you go back.
We need to make sure they want it.
To university, even if he if he intellectually can, he doesn't have that impetus anymore with 60. However, he could have it maybe, with psychedelics.
Right.
Yeah.
It's like telling a journalist to learn to code.
So good.
And by the way, one
stop real quick, because in some ways it's so funny because like Dave Rubin here is like he's referencing yet another sort of Twitter fight where the right wing, probably generated out of 4chan, decided to tell journalists who are having a conversation about the death of print media and such that they should learn to code, they should retool. But it's really like it's like they're talking past each other here. Like Christian Angermayer is literally saying that a 60-year-old with psychedelics might actually learn to code. So and again, why is the 60-year-old fucking like gotta go back to the workforce? Like, leave him alone.
Yeah, I also want to highlight this comment from John G that says this is the primary motivation of mainstreaming these types of treatments, to make people love their lower skilled jobs. And I linked, I'll link it in all the chats, but I linked an article that ran in the New York Times, dealing with ketamine. It was called "I Was Paralyzed by Severe Depression, Then Came Ketamine." And the author actually makes the point that ketamine even makes the bullshit jobs feel better, where she writes, "Though my jobs were poorly paid, ketamine allowed me to utilize the skill I'd learned in therapy to reframe experiences in a positive light. Bleaching gym mats in a martial arts studio and washing buckets in a flower shop became meditative practices rather than drudgery. I hardly recognized the buoyant person I'd become. When my brother got his first pair of glasses, he marveled that he could see individual leaves on a tree. Ketamine felt a lot like that."
Nisha, you've had thoughts on this.
Yeah, this also relates to one of our upcoming lives. We're going to be taking a look at Jordan Peterson's recent increased interest in psychedelics, and specifically because he's very interested in how psychedelics can get you to a place where you're grateful for your location on the status hierarchy. And rather than having resentment for people who are more accomplished and more successful and more competent, who are higher on the hierarchy, you learn to appreciate that, bleaching of the mats, that's your lot in life. So this is definitely a trend as we're seeing the IDW and the kind of right-wing conservatives coming into envisioning what psychedelic medicine can do for society.
I want to sort of bounce off that for a moment and say that like it's kind of interesting because like a lot of psychedelic science to me has been what I've sort of in a flip way called no duh science. It's like psychedelics can help you deal with existential matters. No duh, but like here's a double blind study anyway. But like here's like I don't want to like say that people who are on the right are dumb. In fact, some ways they like see reality in a sort of frighteningly clear way. But in this matter, it's very no duh in the sense that it's like, yeah, no duh. People who live a life of drudgery take drugs to like deal with it. Like, and y'all have been criminalizing them for, like centuries at this point. But now you're just going to say like, let's fold it in to the hierarchical structure that's never, ever going away.
Yeah, well, I think they like the outcomes that come with that.
Yeah, totally. No duh.
Clever.
Too esoteric, where the UK, as the first country, recognized loneliness as a disease, and especially in old people. And it's literally, by the way, if you look at the health data of people who are lonely at any age, their health is dramatically getting worse because we're pack animals. Mm-hmm. So if we are alone, our stress level goes up permanently. So we're going to get depressive, which is, again, depression has an impact on our immune system. So there is a really downward spiral. So so they're not saying yet that depression should be that loneliness should be treated with psychedelics, but the first step is always to speak it out and say, okay, loneliness is a disease, because now we can start going to the regulators and saying, hey, maybe we can prove you in a proper clinical study that psychedelics also might heal not just depression, what we're about to prove, but like also loneliness and stuff like that.
Breadcrumbs.
So, there's this. I want to invoke like the concept of false consciousness around some of this, because it's like he's presenting loneliness as the underlying cause, and yet like loneliness is not like loneliness is an effect. It's a symptom. It's like the reason people feel lonely is not the starting point. Like people feel lonely because they live in atomized societies where worker precarity serves the ruling class. Like, you know, like we can do some analysis on what he's calling the underlying symptom or the underlying causes and see that they're actually systemic symptoms. And this gets back into that uncomfortable terrain that corporadelic actors don't want to engage with because they can't engage with it. Like when you get into that structural analysis and systemic critique of capitalism, of corporations, of like the social relations that accompany that, it's not like if we're talking about treating loneliness in service to the current socioeconomic order, we're talking about maintenance therapies, which is desirable for their sort of rollout, but is not meaningful if we're looking to restructure our social relations so as to try to target loneliness as an ongoing outcome of our societies. And just as a real quick point to Taciturn in the comments, highlighting that the Beckley Foundation is doing great work. I also want to point out, since folks like Angermayer and Compass and some of the large corporadelic players have entered the terrain and given people investment vehicles, Beckley has created a for-profit arm because they were having so many problems raising funds, raising capital as a nonprofit. And so I just want to point out again, tying this back into the systemic realities that these folks would rather us not look at. Like, I believe that the folks at Beckley were sort of quite surprised to learn that their philanthropists weren't actually philanthropists, but were capitalists. And this is why we have to apply the systemic analysis.
Yeah, why donate when you can profit? And I mean, I think that there's a wake up call going on. I would also just sort of call back to some of the things that you were talking about in terms of loneliness. Like, honestly, like loneliness as a systemic and a societal problem that affects individuals, both young and old. What is the what's the sort of value of a psychedelic intervention versus going into any city center and replacing a parking lot with a plaza? A lot of different ways to address these issues is my main point.
Absolutely. Nishay, did you want to talk to Luke's?
Yeah, since Luke asked this question, I hear you all, but isn't there still some value in the 60s rhetoric that psychedelic experiences have intrinsic emancipatory potential? We're going to be talking about more of the emancipatory potential of psychedelics on an upcoming podcast episode with philosopher Emma Stam. So we'll go into that in more depth. We'll be recording that next week. It'll be out after that. But there's definitely the potential for psychedelics to.
That's why we're here.
Yeah. Yeah, but it's like because of the sensitivity to set and setting and rhetorical conditions and all the rest, there's also the potential for it to be used in ways that are not so emancipatory. And for sure, there's always the possibility that you'll set up an authoritarian intention and then people will still have this emancipatory insight in the moment. But there's ways of supporting experiences that are more likely to help people see the kind of nature of the systems that we're living under and imagining futures where the world could be otherwise than it is today and all the rest. And we are interested in encouraging that kind of outcome. Because if you're having these really expansive, insightful experiences, but then you're coming back to an integration coach who's trying to make everything about how you're going to love the bleaching process in the gym the next morning or the martial arts wherever center, then it's going to frame the kinds of experiences that you're having in a way that might neuter that emancipatory potential. And there's other ways of encouraging it on the converse. So we think that they're extremely plastic in terms of like, there's a lot of different directions that it can go, and politically pluripotent. There's lots of different avenues for.
I love that those terms.
What was the term from?
Eric Lonergan wrote a piece engaging with several of Symposia's writings, and yeah, so Eric Lonergan of the Mind Foundation. Hey, Eric, if you're listening to this, thanks for the useful term.
Because the whole premise of just real quick is of psychedelics is non-specific amplifiers, right? There's this stuff that's in the zeitgeist, that's in your head, that's in any script that's floating around can get magnified. And so if you're going to Jordan Peterson's new Catholic hierarchy meditation, you might come out of it feeling like hierarchy is great because that's the whole vibe that you're being exposed to.
Yeah, and just to pick up on that earlier crack of that's why we're here. I mean, I think we all sort of recognize those potentials, and as Taciturn says in the chat, the '60s was a set and setting, and that's just it. Like, to find ourselves here in the
2020s is going to be a set and setting too,
right? And to find that
this is the other chapter.
To find that psychedelics and their potential and whatever sort of catalyzing potential that they present is sort of up for grabs between tech bros and corporadelic actors and these huge institutions who, as Rick Doblin says, we don't do science, we do political science. And, we know that they have clear political agendas, and looking at the way that they're intending to deploy these things to recuperate, to enfold them within dominant culture, and to feel that there's a need to push back on some of that precisely because, as Nishay pointed out, like psychedelic experiences present these political tensions. When you have an experience that sort of ties you into the interconnection of life and you want to figure out how can you live a more free, connected life, and you come back to an integration coach who says, no, you can use these as an internal meditation to be more comfortable with your boss exploiting your labor. Like, we would like to challenge those narratives.
And it's not just clear political, positions like that we intuit it as we're trying to do here. Christian Angermayer is articulating political positions, and he does so constantly, and it really follows along with what Noam Chomsky has long observed, which is like the elite, as Angermayer has clearly identified himself as a member of. They do not hide their intentions for the world.
Yep.
That kind of skullduggery is beneath them. He says, just read the business pages. They say exactly what they want out of the world. We see it with Peter Thiel, and we see it with just about all of these folks. Like these billionaires are articulating a political vision.
And just on Harry Sharp's comment, there's an interesting tension between potentially boundary dissolving chemicals and individualistic capitalist ideology. I don't know if you guys want to riff on that, but it made me think of this article I saw recently the other day with Jeff Bezos of Amazon saying that work-life balance is a debilitating phrase, and he wants to dissolve like the perceived boundary between
Angermayer talks about that on Diary of a CEO, I believe.
Oh, yeah.
That exact thing, yeah.
Bezos said that it's a circle, it's not a dichotomy, which
right.
Reminds me of the True Detective, like, quote, time is a flat circle. Like, it just seems so freaky go on.
So this also reminds me of I think it's called the Hudson Yards Project in New York, where they're talking about this massive development, like multi-use, like, skyscraper type, or at least like tall buildings where it would be mixed use, sort of residential work, all of it. And the point is, you have open floor plans. You have people who can shop in the same buildings that they're working, who maybe live in the same buildings where they're shopping and working. And the idea that you're both sort of always on the clock, but always off the clock, that you're free to shop when you want and sort of mix it up in your workday, but precisely that obliteration of like hard lines between sort of work life, home life, that sense that you'll sort of always be on call, always be available. I mean, this goes to the recent messaging from the Davos Forum, right? The World Economic Forum, that in the future, you won't own anything. You'll just perpetually rent and smash
own nothing but
to,
have access to everything.
Yeah, smash cut to, what is it, Blackstone buying up like all of the houses and attempting to, sort of speculate on basic human needs. But sorry, I'm getting off topic. Let's bring it back to Angermayer.
I think, again, coming back to the beginning, there will be somewhen a disease. Again, we need a cool name for it, or cool, but which is then a fear of the future. Yeah.
Wait, did we come up with a cool name for it yet? What was it again?
Why do we need a cool name for disease?
we got a bunch of cool names.
Yeah, they're back in chat before.
Yeah.
He's so enamored with like the phenomenon of medicalization, of like turning things into a disease, as if naming a disease like makes it real and treatable or something, when really it's just another way that he can market his medicines.
If you pathologize the normal fallout of industrial civilization and capitalism, holy shit, there's buku bucks if you're the person selling treatments.
I mean, it worked for drapetomania, the disease that affected slaves, that caused them to flee from their masters. I mean, somebody was paid to talk about that at some point.
Totally.
Again, then once we have named it, we can maybe run clinical trials and we can bring the ball in motion.
Yeah, I mean, I'm so with you on this. You're right. People have this sort of existential dread about the future. It feels like the past is kind of broken and they're just like, oh, they can't even see what is in the future. So for people that know nothing about this, I think they're probably going, wait a minute. Does this guy just want me to be tripping on mushrooms all day? So what does like an actual way of life look like incorporating some of this stuff? Like, are people just microdosing all day long?
I just think it's interesting that a lot of the people that are probably listening, or what Rubin is speaking to, is just like neoliberalism and globalization just completely ripping apart people's jobs and communities and everything here. And like, it's just not addressed at all whatsoever. Whoops.
So microdose is okay. Let's leave the mic because it's a complex answer. Like, let's stay with what we are doing. So I have a company which just IPO'd, which is called Atai, ATAI, and we have more than 10 new mental health drugs, most of them psychedelic, in development. So what we're doing, we're taking actually either, we have a lot of what we call anecdotal evidence. So I'm always careful because like, I know that I had these amazing, not just one trip, and I know many friends, but in a scientific view, this is still anecdotal. It's like, okay, Christian. At the same time, I know, to be fair, like there are thousands of reports and thousands. And some of these drugs, actually, interestingly, in the last millennia, in the last century, were legal again or medically available for depression and stuff like that, but it's sort of old data. But what we are doing, we're taking these anecdotal and partly...
We already addressed it earlier. I just, fact free the way to be.
Evidence, and really doing, and this is important, very rigorous, really state-of-the-art clinical trials under FDA and European supervision. In order to really prove it. At the moment, I have to say, look, I do think magic mushrooms potentially, or ketamine, or ibogaine, or all the psychedelics, DMT, 5-MeO-DMT. So I have to potentially say, because it's in a sort of scientific way not proven, but we're proving it now once and for all, and we are actually with some of them already in phase 2, which is like sort of pretty advanced for biotech. Some are a little bit earlier stage, but sort of I would say within the next 5-6 years, hopefully some of our drugs will be approved. So, and then this is important, they're going to be medically available.
Yeah, so just want to point out real quick in the context of science, as far as I understand it, you don't really prove things for once and for all.
No, you don't.
And
you really
there's
don't.
Also, I don't know what he means by the notion that or the idea that phase 2 is pretty advanced for biotech. That just seems like meaningless hype.
This is the language of a salesman.
Yes. Bingo.
Any potential investors, in the chat?
Listening in.
This man has a bridge in Brooklyn to sell you.
Take it home, not on prescription, but that you go to your psychotherapist or your doctor, and you do the trip with him or her, which is important because you need a guide. Actually, when you look where these drugs coming from, they were used since thousands of years in ritualistic, shamanistic, religious way. So you always had a priest or a shaman with the disciple, and kind of can say the psychotherapists are the shamans of our time. So, but it's important. So we want to have it in this kind of restricted access, not because I think ultimately
we gotta stop right here. We gotta stop. So
there you have it, right?
Who's restricting the access? Is Christian Angermayer going to come to your house and enforce his patent? Is he going to stop you from taking your mushrooms? Is any employee of Atai going to do this? Who's restricting the access? This is the government.
The government that he doesn't believe in.
This is the government that he doesn't believe in. This is the government and its police force. Jordan Peterson made the argument that saying the wrong pronouns is going to, bring about gulags, because if you break a law and even if the law is just a fine, if you don't pay the fine, ultimately they will come with the guns and the law. So I don't know. Sorry, I just went on.
It's also weird to me that he's alluding in a very sweeping way to indigenous context of use, which it's he wants to make all the money, but saying that the process was developed by these indigenous cultures.
100%.
And it's just kind of casually and subtly slipped in there.
Yeah, but this is the modern age now. How we do things.
Big parts of humanity will sort of benefit from it, but it's a very powerful drug. So it's not that it's not like aspirin, you pop it and you're fine. Again, part of the process is really touching your deepest fears, all of that. Yeah. So
sounds
you have
negative.
To do it with a psychotherapist.
Is it all actually natural substances, or is any of it made in a lab?
We are just using the synthetic version because you need to be precise in quality and dosage. So you will not have homegrown magic mushrooms in a hospital with a doctor, because you need
Stop here real quick. Notice that he does not defend his assertion that you need to be precise. I have argued previously that, the difference between a milligram or 5 milligrams of psilocybin is probably not going to be noticed by your average patient. Basically, in terms of the outcomes that you're seeking, what is it, smoking cessation or depression or something, exactly how precise does one need to be?
That's also not the case that's going to be occurring in Oregon, right?
No, I mean, Oregon has through the ballot box negotiated absolutely a natural products method. And if you did a side by side of people who go through similar therapy with mushrooms and a dose that's weighed out to the third decimal point, I'm just gonna say right here, I'm gonna make a prediction. I don't think that you're gonna have a meaningful. It's a difference without distinction.
It's also a convenient argument for industry and proprietary molecules and patents and whatnot, and deuterating this and that.
And to be
quite
fair,
convenient.
We don't know what it's going to end up looking like in Oregon. We don't know who's going to be able to argue for what, and to what extent natural products and or standardization will how they'll be incorporated into those arguments. And I think there are some concerns by some folks about like who might set up what sort of production and what that ends up looking like, but we'll just have to see.
Totally.
For a patient, you want the clean and perfect version. Yeah.
Can you just tell people how people actually get magic mushrooms? I remember when I was in college and my buddy came in and he had a bag of magic mushrooms and he's like, we're going to do these and blah, blah, blah. And then I was like, well, where'd they come from? And then he told me and I actually couldn't believe it. And it's still sort of amazing. Yeah. But in essence, it's just a mushroom that's growing off cow poop, right?
But yes, in nature, they actually often, not always, but often found on cow poop.
Not to be funny about it growing on cow poop, but it's like metaphysically amazing that this mushroom that grows on cow poop basically can cause you to have a 5-hour trip that could potentially change your life. And when you laid out those 3 steps before, I've done it enough in my life to know that everything you said there was true.
Stop here for so first of all,
I had to include that.
I gotta hand it to Dave Rubin. I actually agree. It is metaphysically amazing. There are certain evolutionary conversations we can have about neurochemical mimics, but no, it truly is amazing and beautiful and poetic that mushrooms that come from shit seem to, alter our meaning structures and such. But it's also really interesting that a Koch brothers grifter like Dave Rubin is somebody who has such intimate knowledge of mushrooms that he very much is picking up what Christian Angermayer is putting down. It's like there have been recent peer-reviewed arguments that have said that psilocybin in particular is going to do the opposite of that. It's going to create a more liberal version of Dave Rubin. Dave Rubin is going to slide back up the ladder to classical liberal and finally into progressivism after his multiple psilocybin trips. But apparently, somehow, this didn't happen.
Outlier. Don't worry about it.
Yeah. We're going to scrub that data from the Excel sheet.
It's metaphysically interesting that it's growing on cow poop. I was just thinking about it. It's an interesting...
It's just a little bizarre.
Any form of psychedelics are illegal, which is actually sad because they weren't in the 50s and 60s for good reason. But anyway, it is what it is. We're going to hopefully make them medically available.
I love that. I love that. We're going to make them medically available. They were legal for no good reason, so we're not going to make them legal again. We're going to make them medically available.
Yeah.
It's great logic.
My view is on religion is whatever you believe, it's definitely healthy for you.
Yikes.
That one is that for me. That's just such a we can look through.
Can you rephrase it just in case anyone missed it? Or
so he said, yeah. He just said my belief is whatever religious beliefs you have, they're good for you.
Yeah, so
Is
Q.
So anything you believe.
Where we go one, we go all. Trump is the Messiah, or whatever. Insert your favorite cult,
Well, yeah. Not only insert your favorite cult, but just look historically or look at present, what religious fundamentalists look at what those beliefs have done, sort of cross culturally. Look at hell, okay, so looking at my own history, looking at the Spanish Inquisition and shit like that,
no one expects the Spanish Inquisition.
Yeah, especially not the Jews. And look at how that played out. The notion that religious beliefs are just good for you across. I don't. Again, I just find
it's a ridiculous statement.
These are throwaways.
It's such a ridiculous statement. But we're gonna listen to it again, though.
Yeah.
My view is on religion is whatever you believe, it's definitely healthy for you.
So wild.
Even if you take GameStop out or whatever, I don't want to make an argument for it. A part of that money is going in innovation, and actually a lot. So at the moment, thanks to the bubble, a lot of innovation is financed. So if you think what money printing does, it takes away practically capital from the ones who are savers, who are savers are actually, forgive me, but the older people. Yeah. And they took a lot out of the world already. And you give it to the younger people. So the younger people.
This guy's taken more and extracted more value out of more humans than probably a large portion of old people.
Also, that's the thing. The class analysis it's non-existent. This isn't about haves and have-nots. This is about age, which is again, it's just fundamentally absurd. Sorry, Pace.
Yeah, no, he's just once again evidencing his vast compassion for like old people who happen to be of lower class. Like, it's just, I don't know what to say.
Might make stupid stuff, right? But overall, they actually finance smart stuff. Look at what is working in the stock market. Climate tech, because they care about climate tech. Yeah, everything they care about, all these story stocks is working. And yes, there might be some stupid ones, but the money is flowing into a lot of good stuff, which actually, if we're lucky, cements the technological leadership of the US.
We should stop this here because, like, I actually want to get in. Like, I feel like, you know, we didn't actually engage with the substance of his ideas here. And I mean, like, we're good faith, if occasionally a little too snarky. The reality is that what he's talking about is, like, you know, with his sort of money printing thing, he's basically saying speculation is good. You know, even if it's a bubble, it's good. It transfers money to useful inventions. But some people are against it because, you know, inflation happens and old people have savings and inflation sort of ultimately devalues people's retirements and such. Okay, cool. What he's also doing is really in a sort of default assumption kind of way, saying that you know, the stock market is the best allocator of resources for innovation, and that it's solving real problems. And actually, he specifically calls out climate. Okay. Once again, I'm going to point out that Siberia reached 120 degrees. Really, to nobody's surprise, at least anybody who's been paying attention to the climate models that have been dutifully put out by the long-suffering climate modelers for decades, literal decades. Okay, and if we get into Exxon literally predicted the parts per million of carbon well into the 21st century back in 1975. Should probably be prosecuted for crimes against humanity. But I don't know. Is there anybody like more well financed than the oil companies of the mid 20th century and onward? Like, I don't know. I mean, I guess Amazon. But did they then finance these solutions? Did they solve the problems that have apocalyptic consequences through the market? No,
they suppressed the knowledge.
No, they did not. So there we go. We've engaged with both the text and subtext of his arguments.
And there's also the fact that, like, if we look at a lot of this technology across the board, it wasn't created as a result of speculative investment. It was created through public funding. It was created through, like, universities. It was created through initiatives that were, that received government grants and money. You know, the government that he doesn't believe in. Like, it was then privatized and wealth was extracted from it. Like, his narratives just break down across the board.
And also, climate tech innovation is not going to solve the climate crisis either. What's going to is degrowth and changing up an economic system, but it's beside the point.
Rather trust a 16-year-old kid to make the right allocation decision than the government.
Yeah.
So before the government tries to do innovation, which never really works.
It's never worked.
Never works, never. Right? Just that cell phone you've got in your pocket,
the
like
internet,
all of the, like,
going to the moon.
Vaccines, all kinds of medicine, all kinds of publicly funded research, going to the moon.
And also, he'll trust the 16-year-old kid, you know, investing in GameStop to literally save the world. But
the 16-year-old kid can't invest in GameStop, by the way.
Right. Yeah,
that's illegal. You can't get on. You can't get on Robinhood as a 16-year-old either.
Don't get me wrong. I actually very much do believe in the liberatory power of empowering the youth to make changes and stuff. So
sure, I just don't know how.
Not Robinhood.
but not but he does not believe that the market is going to protect his business like investment in this entire like IP model that the government's going to do, and he's banking on it, you know.
Yep.
Yeah, I like to live in the Western world. It's actually the place where most people want to live. Yeah, and so I want the West to succeed.
Says the totally not Western chauvinist Christian Angermayer.
Well, and why? Like, let's just ask for one reason why it is that people might want to live in the West. Is it because through colonialism and slavery and the IMF and the World Bank and neoliberalism that you know raw materials flow to these places, or flow to you know Western controlled manufacturing centers or free trade export centers, and that all of the benefits of the global output flows to the West because of you know a history of genocide and domination? Like, I mean, it certainly isn't the fucking weather, that's for sure, because I've spent some time in the tropics. Like, there are nicer places to hang out than Finland, you know.
Into history, always the dominating economic superpower became also the dominating political power, but also like not just setting the agenda.
Yeah.
Thing. So I desperately want America to get sort of succeed in that, and I think money printing might be the smartest way to do it. So I would just go on printing, just because we can't lose in a time of exponential growth. We can't lose out on innovation.
Right, it's so crazy. So just keep printing the money, which oddly devalues it at some level, but at the same time allows young people to just keep pumping it into all the cool new things, and then hopefully that's a net win.
It's a lot of, but there will be good companies at the end. And again, the price is paid by older people who have savings. But I don't want to say anything. I don't know how to say nice in English, but if you're like 80, you're not going to matter in 50 years, most likely.
Unless the longevity treatments that he has started saying that we're going to do actually work. So I'm not sure how he squares that circle.
I have to say, this argument about money printing is not what I would expect to hear coming from him whatsoever. Sure. And I don't think Dave Rubin hides his disdain for that too well on that clip, personally.
I just want to real quick run through some of Nick Wallace's comments coming in from YouTube. He says, I generally loathe the government as that they people love to throw in arguments when they're feigning intelligence. Groups of people can do bad and can do good. It's just tiresome when people say government. Should we trust their governing structures, their nepotism, their pyramid schemes, etc.? What's their alternative? Because it looks like shit from where I'm sitting. Actual metaphysical shit, though. And yeah, I mean, that's just it. Like, if you look at, like, when we talk about, like, government funding some of these, you know, whether we're talking about vaccines or, you know, networked technology and things like that, like, we're talking about, like, money that is coming out of people's pockets that has been paid through tax. Like, you know, like the notion that there can't be collective government projects that invest in the public good just doesn't hold. And the notion that the free market, like as Rubin and Angermayer are kicking those ideas back and forth, like one of the thoughts I had was, gee, like it would be kind of funny to see a society modeled on, like actually modeled, that actually didn't have any of that government investment, that actually let the free market decide, you know, across the board, and to just like see a little simulation of what that looked like.
I think a lot of us have seen Arnold Schwarzenegger's The Running Man, so, you know. Anyhow,
shall we go ahead? We've been. I think we're almost done with the.
Yeah, let's go for it.
Video. Time to line
I
these
like
guys
to
up.
see these money printing as kind of almost a 50-100% inheritance tax, because you take it away from the people who are going to leave this planet in the next 20, 30 years, and you give it to
take
the younger
their shit
people
because they're
going to
die.
That's what we all want. By the way, again, in that's where we could merge like left and right. Like, climate change is a problem. The question is just, do we change it by I don't know, standing on the street? Or do we change it with technology, with real innovation, with going to renewable energy, but making that even way more efficient, getting fusion finally running? I have a very cool investment there. Like, and it will work out the next 10 years. If we get fusion running, forget about solar, then the thing is fusion. Like, so, but tech will...
When he said by standing on the street, is he talking about like protesting?
Yeah.
Okay, I wasn't.
So if they're building a pipeline through where you live, like don't protest that. Just like, invest in technology. He's got a cool fusion center. Oh, Pace, I think you're muted.
That's a good catch. I don't think I actually caught that the first time through. So
yeah.
It's protesting. I'm sorry. Protesting is negative. So.
That's right.
We're also waving a damn placard, as JP would say.
Just need to embrace it.
Tech will save the world, not kill it. Well, I love that you're positive for the future and that you want to bring everyone with you, because you usually don't really hear the tech people talking about that. And I should say that I know that you're a wise investor because you also did invest in locals, which I hope makes you more money than your mushrooms and longevity and everything else. That is my hope for you.
So I didn't know what Locals was before watching this, but Locals, I believe, is Rubin's like social media platform that kind of combines like crowdfunding, YouTube, Facebook type thing. So Angermayer, I did just learn that Angermayer is an investor in Rubin's social media company.
Yeah, I mean, these are so Rubin. Just for more Rubin context, like he in his like idea of the new center, which again includes a number of people who have since appearing on his platform have like been banned from like Twitter and such. And I'm talking about people specifically like Sargon of Akkad or Lauren Southern. These individuals, he wants to make sort of a new Gab, Substack, or what have you,
They want to get Trump on it.
There you go.
So I was thinking like what makes people happy, overall. So I think you need three things. You need any form of faith. I touched it already a bit, but and by the way, coming again back to why, because it's fear and trauma, and the biggest fear we all have, and we don't admit, we could die, or I could die, other people you love could die. So I'm permanently terrified that some of my parents will die. This is like a permanently trauma or a permanently nagging fear. Religion, again, don't argue if it's real or not, but if you believe in something which is a little more than this world, it takes a little bit away this sort of nagging fear of losing people for good. The second thing you need is you need purpose. So people want to know why they're here. They want to be needed. They want to be included. And the third is love. It's very cheesy. We need family, but we also need love in a wider circle. We need a good environment. Friendship, whatever. So, and unfortunately, coming back on the whole development, all these three things in the world we live in are actually dissolved a bit. So faith is on a record decline. Purpose kind of as well, because I told you, most people feel that their job might not be there anymore in 10 years. And then also love in a certain way, because we're dissolving in record speed things which give us in a certain way family systems, but also the community. Any of these three things which make our mind.
Yeah, I just want to point out that his class has been responsible for the decline of most of those things too.
Yep. Yeah, and I would also say geez, how do you argue against faith, purpose, and love? I mean, what kind of curmudgeon would you have to be to do that? Well, I'm not here to do that. But I am here to say that, first of all, one can have faith, purpose, and love in a very secular manner. And I'm not against people having faith in whatever religion. I don't have a problem with that either. But I do want to see material change that lifts up people who don't who don't have the basics of food, clothing, and shelter. Sounds like a pretty good purpose to me. You look around every city in the world, and or every rural community in the world, and you've got plenty of work that could be done and a lot of unemployment. So purpose, how about we make a sustainable society that is generative, that makes a place for us now and a better place for our children. And what better way, what better like motive for doing that than love? Like, so I don't think we need this like intermediary, whatever it is, the vision that he's articulating to get there. You know,
we need psychedelics to get there.
Psychedelics.
I just think it's just like it's super telling that he skips over, and it's funny because Pace, you and then Nick Wallace in the comments, and my initial thoughts as well was like food, clothes, shelter, community, like, you know, like, but his analysis skips over any sort of like material analysis precisely because like,
well, look what's behind them.
Well, and
like he doesn't need any of these things.
Exactly.
Not even
and even if you just look at it on a local, you know, just to bring it back to where we started with some of this conversation and bring it back to Rwanda, right? Like when you look at like it's not even the abstract of his class makes this possible. Like he is directly involved with a government that is actively like destroying the material reality and social fabric that gives people that, you know, allows people to create stability in their own lives.
Yeah, no, way to bring it back home. Love it.
Ain't happy is on decline. And the good thing is if they come back, psychedelics give you back of that. They give you back faith, spirituality. They give you back purpose because they show you, hey, this is what you really want. Even if you're 60, whatever, you can do that. And they give you back, most important, love and connection to close people and the world. So
okay, stop it again. Or you're just confused as fuck. You know, which does happen. Like, look, I want to just acknowledge the full spectrum of what can happen with psychedelics. Yeah, you can have the connection. Yeah, you can have the love. But you can also have a real existential bummer and be really trying to figure things out for a little while afterwards. And that's, you know, anybody who is mainstreaming or pushing these things, who doesn't speak about these things, is doing us all a disservice.
We're going to even hear less and less about these things, and we're going to hear more and more absolute statements like this. Yep. I think for investment,
that's what sells product.
Company, yeah, exactly.
Yep.
That's the formula everybody should, with or without psychedelics. I think it's just a very good tool for that to hold on to.
You have a newsletter. Is there a way where can they sign up?
No, it's just for close friends because I'm very political.
No. I should have realized that I'm on a very special newsletter. That's not the public newsletter. Now I'm even more honored.
Very small group of people.
I would love to read Angermeyer's super secret extra political newsletter.
Well, I'm assuming that this is where Shayla Love at Vice got those
Totally.
If anyone has access to that, hi@Psymposia.com, send it our way because I'd love to get on it.
That'd be great.
Yes, please.
Oh.
Yeah.
So this
just
is
added this here.
Receipts.
Look, if he's listening, or anyone in the Atai Compass Circle is listening, let him know. We'd love to do this. We've been waiting for a year and April, May, June, July. We've been waiting for 16 months now. We've accepted multiple times. I think this is the third time that we're accepting. The third or fourth time that we're
accepting. I think. This is Angermeyer's invitation to a debate following his erroneous statements about hydroxychloroquine and azithromycin.
Yep.
We can face-to-face it now, too. We're all vaccinated. Let's do it.
Is that
Christian? I really love this. I would love to trip with you sometime. We're gonna have to do that. So I hope to see you soon.
We're gonna go to the Caribbean. I'm a great shaman.
Do you act as a shaman too?
I don't know if I want to go here on a public like. We're gonna set it up somewhere.
We'll figure out something. Okay. All right. It was great seeing you.
Like I'm. Yeah. But I think I have compassion a bit, and this is a good starting point for tripping together.
Nice.
No chill.
All right, sounds good.
Just as long as you're not too old.
He basically admits, right?
Oh,
Guides people like.
sorry, I knocked you off, Nishay, accidentally.
Oh,
that.
I was just saying he basically admits that he guides people, right?
Sure.
Like,
Or he's bragging a
'cause
little
his-
bit right there.
I don't know. To me, his immediate reaction was like, "Oh, Daph, like I totally do this," and then he thought about it and was like, maybe I shouldn't be so forthcoming. That's how I read it.
Me too.
Well, you know, he was talking about how his two friends and original shamans on that island that his buddy owns, that they're going to be building a mushroom statue or some sort of altar. You know, so who knows? Maybe
you know that Rubin and Peterson and all these people are going to be down there. They're all going to be tripping together.
They're going to play some Zeppelin. It's going to be a pretty good afternoon.
They're all going to turn out to be progressive liberals at the end of their 8-hour time together.
Without a doubt.
But
So there it is.
Well,
if it is true that he's like playing shaman or whatever, like it adds like another dimension of just questionability to his psychologization.
Well, I think the word's
logic.
hypocrisy, actually, because
Right.
we want a very restricted, very controlled, highly trained, like by the book that we happen to be writing. But I guess that's the privilege of the moneyed man,
Precisely. I was going to say that seems totally consistent with sort of billionaire entitlement and logic across the board, as far as like who rules apply to, who laws apply to, who.
Yeah, absolutely. It's very telling.
Like
very telling.
The logic of like psychological stuff will come up for you, so you need a highly skilled therapist to be there and then yet Angermayer with his like totally all over the place facts, et cetera, like he's like,
well,
totally
you just throw enough of that out there to make it like kind of plausible.
It raises the question: does he believe it? Like, does he actually believe that it's so dangerous that you need the trained person? Of course
not. That would be completely at odds with his libertarian belief system. Come on,
right? So then it's pure marketing, right? This is a strategy to put money in his pocket. Yeah.
I just think I want to know what color his shamanic wiffle bat is that he uses to whap down all the negative thoughts and feelings while somebody's tripping. Anyhow, we can imagine.
So yeah, this
needing
is
to have.
No, you go.
Go ahead. I was real quick. Just that I've just been thinking about that, needing to have people pre-check that films are like don't have a negative ending. Like almost reminds me of like a sort of safety behavior that you would do for like anxiety to like avoid anything that makes you feel uncomfortable. And it's like that's considered to be like a kind of pathological avoidance strategy, so I don't know.
Well, he should never watch Midsummer. Don't ever watch it.
Which I recently rewatched because I love that.
You rewatched
and it happens to be Midsummer. So
yeah, don't ever watch it.
Great,
it's
great
the scariest ending of all time. And it's a psychedelic film too. So
yeah, well, I think we've done.
Yeah,
go on.
No, I just wanted to say, like, just towards like winding us down, that like I think this particular conversation with these people is quite indicative of where this is all going. As Nishay mentioned earlier, we're going to be getting into some Jordan Peterson content, both with his recent interview with Roland Griffiths, and then some others, his sort of general increasing focus on psychedelics. We've also got a comment in the chat. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I was just saying the Murescu, I can't pronounce his last name, but
Murescu, you got it.
That Jordan Peterson interview hasn't even like been released yet, but I think is in the pipeline.
Yeah, and Angermayer said that he's also working with some project involving Mirror Rescue and somebody else.
Yeah, he said it is a good friend, actually.
Yeah, yep. So there's a bunch of stuff that I guess we'll see where it goes. And I just wanted to throw out that there was a comment in the chat that said, in I guess Angermayer's defense, many psychedelic experts would say the same thing and feel the need to add caveats about safety. And yeah, I think both in the case of so one, in coming from a lot of the experts and researchers, particularly let's say pre-2018, there was no financial incentive for them to say that. There might be, we could say there was like the career incentive of, better not say something that'll get you in trouble with your research institution. But also I think in the context of like broader human use, for the amount of people using this stuff outside of clinical contexts and the amount of harm, I think mushrooms were found to be like the safest or illegal drug.
According to the World Health Organization, yeah, if you look at hospitalizations and harms to self and community, like internationally, mushrooms are the lowest.
But then the closing part of this comment, where it says, in his awkward way, he may in part just be imitating experts, which I would be inclined to agree with 100%. The problem is where you wind up when you're just imitating experts and don't have your own sort of analysis and understanding, and then explain to people that the ego is located in a discrete part of the brain known as the default mode mechanism. Things kind of get real weird real fast. So I appreciate the perspective and sort of like leveling it out. And I think also there's a problem when billionaires can sort of buy or manufacture that expertise and then just propagate it. You propagate nonsense from whatever sort of platform they get.
And those very same researchers are incentivized to not correct that person ever.
Yeah, when they hold the purse strings.
Yeah.
Hi, Tim Ferriss. Well, does anyone else have any?
I don't know. This is just a real preview of where things are going to go, and I hope people who are listening take it like Rubin. You guys have a lot to say on the whole right wing thing. I'm not going to get into that, but I just think this is a preview of where things are going. It's going to accelerate.
And I think a lot of the researchers, especially the Robin Carhart Harrises and other people who have been writing about the liberalizing effects perceived of psychedelics, that have not been seeing this whole wave that's coming.
I just don't know how you can actually say that seriously when sort of like the bedrock of this is non-specific amplifiers, or the word is called psychedelic. I don't understand how you forget that so easily. Or you can't parse that out of the set and setting of the 60s. It seems very naive or dishonest.
I'll just say this, that there, as is evidenced by recent events in January and before, there's an incredible cultural boldness that is being funded, encouraged by on the right. There is it's both an existential kind of situation in that situations are arising that are challenging the foundation of the sort of hierarchical worldview that has brought about a lot of crisis, but also there's also nothing to lose, and so we will be seeing more conversations on right-wing talk shows about psychedelics. You heard it here first.
I do think that psychedelics are going to become a right-wing project. We'll see what happens. I think
we'll get to find out.
There's certainly no indications for me that it's like going to be some left-wing type thing or some kind of center-left type thing. I don't see it anywhere.
And especially the media landscape around psychedelics is so heavily right wing.
The biggest influencers right now on the internet are the biggest right wing political influencers on the internet. Maybe not all, but a lot of them have
a number of them
advocated for psychedelics. Surrounded by Rogan in sort of adjacent to him, all of them.
And anyone who wants to quibble over terms, look up neoliberalism and get back to us.
Well, it's they're the ones with the money, so it's you end up, you can't just have a lefty YouTuber vaulted to the sort of reach of someone like Joe Rogan or Jordan Peterson or any of these people. Like, there's just not any
Or Rubin.
competing in terms of, or Rubin. Yeah. There's no competing in terms of scale. There's not going to be any oil billionaires that are funding lefty perspectives, online. So in terms of like what ideas are getting, the wind behind their sails and what's being circulated, it's going to be increasingly conservative takes about psychedelics.
I agree with Matt.
Baggett's.
I agree with you entirely on that point.
And that's what Jordan Peterson is advocating for. These evangelical psychedelic churches. That's like,
what a powerful tool for an evangelical charlatan like swindler to have.
Well, and it gets even, like, if you think about, so I don't want to say too much, but like thinking about the JP interview with Roland Griffiths and how excited JP is about the dosing religious leaders study or whatever. And now you've got Angermayer involved with Murescu and involved with some sort of religious project there, and just sort of seeing all of that these people are in each other's orbits and that they're all sort of like fixating on this like idea of religiosity and like, it's the kind of stuff that I don't think it bodes well. I mean,
well, let's actually address Harry's anxieties and say that, like the reality is that like, okay, psychedelics, they do tap into our sense of meaning, and any kind of narrative that we build around them can play out in a larger sense. And so I guess what I would like to say, perhaps in a way of like wrapping up, is that ultimately, like, what we're trying to do at Psymposia is to provide counter narratives, to complexify the discourse, to actually cover what kinds of phenomena, like, people who've been paying attention for a long time know to be true. And in doing so, we hope that certain facts become stubborn facts, and that we as a society do the hard work to find a better model for what to do moving forward.
Yeah, and for those of you who are interested in this strain of conversation, as I mentioned, we'll be looking at the Jordan Peterson talk soon, and I clipped down, condensed the originally 2.5 hour conversation between Jordan Peterson and Roland Griffiths to like a 45-minute sequence without sacrificing content, really. So I just tried to condense it down. So we're going to be watching that together and chatting about it, and he really goes into, he really hints at his vision for this kind of conservative future of psychedelics. So we can talk more about it then.
Mm-hmm.
And there's also there's just no resistance to that vision either, because the dominant discourse in the space is politics prohibited. Don't talk about
politics
that.
Prohibited, even as Dublin is running around saying we don't do science, we do political science, right? It's not that politics are prohibited, it's that politics that challenge like dominant discourse is prohibited. And frankly, like to that end, like we're in the process of reviving our Discord. I just went ahead and threw that across the chat. It's currently like there's folks who are in there. It's not super active, but
it's currently like a Canadian shell company.
Yes, we are reviving it. So by all means, if Discord is a thing that you do or are interested in, please join us over there, and we can carry these chats on in a more freewheeling long form.
Exactly. Yeah. And people can come, just like share their perspectives and join in on the conversation.
Yeah. And also anyone listening to this, on watching this, subscribe on whatever podcast service you use, the +3 podcast, or search Psymposia on there.
And you can find us on Patreon at patreon.com/Psymposia if you want to help sustain what we're doing. It really absolutely enables what we do.
Totally.
Yeah, and thank you to all of our supporters, both just in spirit supporters and people who are able to contribute.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right.
Well,
Thanks so much, everyone.
We also got some great Angermayer content coming out in the next week or two on the podcast. So
stay tuned.
We just beat on them all day long. That's our hobby.
All right. Well, it's been a good one. We'll catch y'all in the next time.
Yeah.
Have a good day, everybody. Bye.
All right. So long.